Irish Breakdown Nation. After a long wait from what feels like ages ago, from when Notre Dame took on Indiana at home in the first round of the playoffs, we are finally here. And we are here. It is now game day. Notre Dame takes on Georgia tonight in the Sugar Bowl. I was telling Brian before we got started, I've been up since 5 a.m. I haven't been able to sleep. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. And I'm excited that we are doing a mailbag today to kind of help pass the time to get things along. But Brian, I know before we dive into everything today, I know you had a special message that you wanted to convey.
Yeah, a couple actually. One, obviously a sad note, and the other one that just speaks to there's two things we're going to talk about. One speaks to the worst of our humanity. The other speaks to the best of our humanity. And the worst, obviously, is we want to offer prayers up to all those who are down there. I pray that, and you never want any loss of life. You never relieved when it's, someone that not someone but I just pray the people that we know, our IB family we're not part of that tragedy last night. And talked to Vince this morning. He's fine. They didn't go out last night. They were in the hotel room. He was actually in bed when that happened. Hoping to hear back from a couple other people that I know that are down there. So definitely offering our prayers up for that. And just speaks to the evil in the world. But we a lot of times can focus on that. But there was another thing I was going to start the show off with today before that happened. And it shows that while there are people that are hell-bent on causing tragedy and pain and heartache and death, there's also a lot more people that are just giant hearts. And I want to talk today about a member of our community, Trev, a guy named, we know him. He's asked questions all the time. He has super chats. I mean, not super chats, but mailbag buy, so hold questions all the time. Rhesus Christ. And I hope you're watching right now. I have been communicating with your wife, Charlotte, the last couple of days. And she and I have been talking about a lot of the stuff that she's going through. And first and foremost, know that Charlotte is absolutely going to be and remain in my prayers and my wife Angela's prayers. And I know these last several years have been a tough one for your family. But, talking to Charlotte, it is amazing. Like, Trev, I believe when you get married, your number one priority in your life at that point in time becomes your wife. And that can be hard for us all, especially working people. But Charlotte has been in and out of the emergency room, in and out of the hospital, spent a lot of football season in a hospital. And her husband, and we said his board name is Rhesus Christ, has been by her side the entire time, watches all the football games in their tiny hotel room, waits until she's medicated and asleep before he showers, before he eats. He doesn't go home to work. He stays there by her side. She tried to convince him to go home, even though she didn't want him to. He refused. He stayed. He was by her side. There is no greater calling as a husband than to be there for your wife in those situations, to make sure that you're caring for her body, her spirit, her soul. And my man, you have so done that. And your wife just wanted to be able to let everybody know the kind of husband you are and how thankful she is for you. And I commend you because, as I said, man, as a husband, there's no greater responsibility, no greater joy than to be there for your family and to sacrifice all the things you've sacrificed for your family. And man, I got to tell you, I have a great deal of respect for you, and it has nothing to do with you being a Notre Dame fan. It has to do with you being a great husband. And Charlotte is greatly appreciative of that. And she and I, like I said, have been exchanging emails, just kind of finding out what's going on. Some of the stuff she said she was okay with me sharing. I'll go ahead and keep those specific things between us as far as what she's going through. But folks, it was like 3 paragraphs worth of, these are all the things that I'm going through medically right now. And it's not easy. And he's had to, the people that go through these things, it's hard on them, harder on them than anything else. But a lot of times we forget about how hard it can be on the people that are going through that journey with them. And sadly, in our day and age, some guys just decide, I'm not man enough to stand here and be by my wife's side, so I'm out. And not my guy, Rhesus Christ. He said, look, I made my vows. I'm here through thick, right, for better, for worse, through, sickness and health. And my man, I commend you, because that's what a husband should be. And I know Charlotte's very, very thankful for you. And I am as well. I mean, you have earned our respect. And I in a day like this, where we see this kind of evil, we also need to lift up the fact that God made a lot more people like Rhesus Chris than he did the people trying to cause this terror down in New Orleans. And so, Charlotte, you are going to be in our prayers. My man, Rhesus Chris, you will also be in our prayers as well. But thank you. Thank you for showing the love that you have for your wife, not just saying it. Respect to you, my man.
Yeah, well said, Brian. And, obviously same goes for us here in the Trowbridge household. Prayers and thoughts out to anybody that's down in New Orleans. And for Rhesus Chris, I mean, it's displaying selflessness like that is not an easy thing to do. And no matter who it is, right? I mean, sometimes people assume that you're selfless because you have a spouse or because you have kids. And selflessness is an act that is not easily done. And hats off to you, man, because
during a time when we have a 50% divorce rate, because men don't want to step up and, do what they need to do, my man did.
Yep. So shout out to you, man. Shout out to you.
Yep.
Well, Brian.
Yeah. Let's get to some football. I know that's why everybody tuned in, but I want to start off here. We had a lot here from Jordan Schreiber, and we'll go ahead and get started off with his first mailbag question. Yeah, by the way, remember, just put an MB in there or a mailbag emoji. If you want to get your question to the top, you go ahead and leave a super chat, and as soon as we see it, we'll go right to that. But get those questions in, everybody, and we are going to rock and roll. You can ask about the Notre Dame Georgia game. You can talk if you want to talk about the game last night. If you want to talk about other bowl games, you can talk recruiting. This is a typical mailbag. It doesn't have to just be about tonight's game, but of course, if you want to ask about tonight's game, feel free, because that's obviously the thing that we're most interested in right now.
So Jordan Schreiber asked, graduating from 2XL to 3XL, has Emil Wagner grown to a proper lineman size? Has he kept his athleticism? And do you expect a jump in year 2 if he starts again?
All good questions. I don't know that I have the answers to all of them. I do think he's kept his athleticism to any degree that a guy's going to keep athleticism when he puts on 30, 40 pounds. I mean, that Emil still moves relatively well. Has he grown into proper lineman size? He's always going to be undersized. I mean, you don't ever want a tackle to have a 2 in front of his weight, right? And he is, I believe, based on the Notre Dame depth chart, or the Notre Dame roster, I believe he is their lightest weighing offensive lineman, because I believe Anthony Knapp is like a pound or two more than him. Yeah, Emil's 291. Anthony Knapp is listed at 294. So, yeah, that's definitely undersized, especially someone who's 6'6", but he's always going to be undersized. The question was never about his weight. The question was, would he be able to hold up at that weight? And this season, he held up well at that weight. Now, next year in year 2, Trev, is he going to be able to become a guy that's maybe more of a mover, a guy that's able to be more effective in the run game, a guy that's able to anchor better than he did this year? We'll find that out, because sometimes with guys like Emil, sometimes they just get to a point, and because of their limitations size-wise, this is just kind of who they are, and Emil, if he's going to hold off some of the younger players, is going to have to continue to get better also. But I have to think he's going to be better next year, even if he doesn't get any bigger or stronger, because he's going to have more experience in the system. He's going to have more, technical, prowess. There's going to be things that are going to allow him to be better. The question is, how much better? That I don't know. But as a first-year starter, there's always room for you to continue improving your technique, your assignment correctness. You learn little tricks of the trade. Hey, I have trouble with bigger players, and so here's what I've learned to do against them. Here's a little trick. Here's a little thing that I can do to better handle those type of players. He'll learn all that stuff based on the experience he's had this year and be able to build on it and carry it into next year and be a better player. So as long as there's no injury and he continues to work hard, which I've never heard anyone question at all, Emil Wagner's work ethic, then I would expect improvement next season. I don't know how much physical improvement we'll see from him next year. That's the only question. But the technical improvement alone. Now, the question is, how much improvement can he make? That remains to be seen. But that's true of all these linemen, right? How much better is Billy Strouth going to be next year with a 2/3 of a season under his belt? How much better can Anthony Knapp get? Don't know the answer to that. I don't know how to quantify that, but you always expect some level of improvement just on the technical advancements and the experience alone. The only question is, okay, how much of it? And that's the unknown for Emil.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I would say I would label it a jump for him. I think he could become more well-rounded as an offensive lineman. I mean, that's the interesting talking point with the two tackles, right? Anthony Knapp is really good in the run game, and he struggles in the passing game, right? And Emil Wagner is basically the opposite. He's been their most consistent pass blocker and one of their more inconsistent run blockers. So it's going to be interesting to see how both of them fill out. And I do think that Emil Wagner's build will play a factor into him holding his own a little bit more in the run game. So going to be interesting to see what that looks like for him. But yeah, I don't know if I can predict how big of a jump. You know what I mean? So that's where I am on that one. Carlos Garza asked, just curious, do you think Saban and Alabama would have been as dominant now with the way Nil is as they were the past 10 to 12 years?
No, and I think that's part of the reason that Coach Saban got out. And I watched some clown show of a podcast last night. Georgia, couldn't sleep. I'm working like 3 o'clock in the morning. I came across some Georgia podcast, and it was just like two just absolute clowns. Just super disrespectful. Not even just about Notre Dame, but just because they actually it was odd. But they were talking about like Nick Saban quit and he was afraid, and all these other kind of things, and it was just absurd. But I'm like, Nick Saban didn't quit, because what's even funnier is these are Georgia fans talking about Nick Saban was afraid. I'm like, y'all know he beat you the last time he played you last year, right? You know that the reason that Alabama was in the playoff is because they beat Georgia, right? It's just absurd. But I think Nick Saban believes in coaching football a certain way. And at 70-something years old, he's not going to change that. He's going to be the coach he is. He believes in certain things. And I don't agree with everything that Nick Saban believes in, but when it comes to developing young people a certain way, he believes in it. And he doesn't believe that you can coach that way in this era. At least he couldn't. The way he likes to coach, the way he likes to build a roster. He knew that he wasn't going to be able to do that. He wasn't going to be able to keep kids on campus for 2-3 years without playing. And back in the day, kids would sit it out. Bama, they lost transfers from time to time, but not a ton. And a lot of the transfers they lost were guys that were forced out, basically, removed from the program because they were making room for somebody else because they weren't going to help them. Guys would wait 2-3 years and finally get their shot as juniors and seniors, step up and have big time years. I mean, think about the running backs they were pumping out every year. Those guys aren't sitting anymore. If they're not playing as a rookie, they're out, or freshman or sophomore, they're out, and it's just hard to build the kind of depth that Alabama did, which is impressive about the way that Notre Dame has been able to build the depth they've built this year with all that. But no, I don't think they would have been as dominant. Would Alabama still be a dominant program if Nick Saban was there? Yes. Would Alabama have been better this year if Nick Saban was there? Absolutely. Because even though they would have lost players to NIL, they would not have lost as many as they lost. Like Caleb Downs isn't going anywhere if Nick Saban doesn't leave. He didn't jump on the portal because he was just looking for a payday. It's like once Nick Saban left, well, that's the reason I'm at Alabama. So now I'm going to jump on the portal. He would not have been alone in that situation. And, that there's no doubt. But would they have won – go back to 2009, they won, 6 national titles over a 15-year period, basically, 14-year period. Will they have done that moving forward the next 15 years? No. In the combination of the 12-team playoff and the transfer portal and NIL, there's no way Alabama wins that many titles. Even if you retroactively put this back to starting in 2009, I don't think that they do that. And I think that's partly why he got out. So, no, they would still be dominant. Any team Nick Saban coaches is going to be dominant. Would they have been as dominant? No. And that was already starting to happen. I mean, I said in 2020, I said this is going to be the last truly great Alabama team that Nick Saban has. 2021, they played for the title again, and were a little better that year than I thought. But they've been kind of progressively going down ever since. So they were already starting even before the NIL and portal really ramped up. And I think that would have continued, Trev.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why Nick Saban is held in such a high regard is he did such a good job of doing what elite coaches do. And that is put your veteran guys in positions to be successful and go out and win games with the guys that you have and develop the young guys behind them. That's why those rosters were just always loaded. But, you have that one viral picture. And I think in one picture, it's, TJ Yeldon and Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry and all these guys that now all play in the league, right? And all those guys would have left. Derrick Henry was the premier running back at Alabama for a year. I mean, he's not waiting if that was now. So,
right.
I think that's, you brought it up. One of the reasons why Nick Saban left is just because the art of why he loved coaching and developing young people is not lost, because there's teams that are having success with it. Notre Dame is a prime example of that, in my opinion, but it's not. Nick Saban was a little bit more old school in the I'm going to get a guy for a minimum 3 years and put my time and development into him. Now it's really you get maybe a year and a half before people start wandering the eyes. So, yeah.
I mean, and he was an open book about it. He's like, I'm sitting there after the season and I got all these kids coming over to the house and I'm meeting with parents, and his wife, Miss Terry's like, why are we doing this? Because all these parents want to talk about is NIL money. And that's kids coming up to him after the season saying, okay, I need you to pay me next year or play me next year. And if not, I'm going to leave. And it's just that's not what we got in this for. Now, I'm not saying that, that's not, a reason to get out, but at his age, I completely get it. I don't think if he was 45, he would be getting out at that age. He'd have to adapt like all younger coaches. But when you've done what he's done, it's kind of like, why? What else do I have to prove?
I was just about to say that. Yeah. What more do you have to show if you're Nick Saban? Nothing.
Right. Exactly. Trev, we got some super chats, man. Let's start down here.
Super chat from Jersey Bear. Thank you for the super chat. Irish Breakdown. I think Boise proved they belonged last night. They had 2 missed field goals and a touchdown called back away from it being interesting. Go Irish.
Yeah, so what I'm so sick of is I'm so tired of every time a team loses or loses convincingly, if it's not a blue blood. We're hearing the same crap last night and this morning from lame national media talking about this is why Boise didn't belong, because Penn State could have blown them out even more. So freaking what? I mean, guys, we've seen this. I keep saying we see this all the time, right? I mean, we see this all the time. So did Oklahoma not belong in 2019 when they gave up a 63 spot to LSU and got beat by over 30 points, almost 40 points? And that game could have been way worse. LSU called off the dogs. It was like, okay, no, they didn't belong. Okay, well then who did? If they didn't belong, who did? So I get so why look, and this is coming from me. Y'all know how I feel about Penn State. Why can't we just give Penn State credit and say they were the better team? Boise State is a really good football team. Penn State is better. And I love that he said this, that Jari Z-Bear said this, because it's good. You can show look, Boise State's a really good football team. They hurt themselves a little bit last night. And Penn State also missed on some opportunities to blow that game open as well. Trev, you and I were texting about that with Vince. Penn State was a better football team. That doesn't mean that Boise didn't belong. If you want to have a conversation, however, about should Boise have gotten a bye, I can have that conversation with you, right? I've said this before. I don't necessarily want to jump into just the top 4 teams. I've said this before. My proposal would be you set some sort of ranking standard, whether it's top 8 or top 10. You've got to rank the top 8 to get a bye. That's fine. And if that team doesn't, then the next highest ranked team qualifies, right? But here's the deal. There's still a good chance that if Penn State's getting the 4 seed, there's still a decent chance that they're playing Boise State in the second round. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So I just wish people would just chill with the agendas and just break down the game. Just break down the game. Here's why Boise State couldn't win. Here's what Penn State did to shut them down. They focus all their attention on Ash and Genty, and the quarterback wasn't able to make enough plays, and they couldn't hurt themselves. That sounds a whole lot like the analysis we gave last weekend on Saturday, right? Boise's going to, Ash is going to get his, and he did, got 100 yards last night, but he's not going to be able to carry the team the way they have in the past unless the quarterback and the pass catchers can step up and make plays, and they weren't able to make enough of those. But at the same time, what was it? It was 24-14 when they missed that field goal. They had a touchdown called back on that drive, and it was a legitimate penalty. But it was a penalty that didn't affect the play at all. It should have been called. You can't just put your hands up in a guy's face and knock his helmet off, right? What I'm saying is it's not like they scored because of the penalty. It's not like a left tackle yanks down a DN who's about to drill his quarterback, then he throws the ball, and you're like, yeah, but that's not a touchdown if the guy doesn't hold him because your quarterback's going to get slaughtered on the backside. It was a legitimate penalty, but it didn't impact. It's like the Ashton Craig hold again on Jadarian Price against A&M. It didn't affect the play at all. But it was, whatever. So Boise proved they belong last night, but they also proved that in this stage, you can't make the mistakes that they made. You can't have 2 missed field goals. You can't have a touchdown wiped off the board because of a penalty when you're playing another really good football team. That's what last night showed. It did not show. I mean, watching Boise State's D-line eat up Penn State in the pass game, they belonged. And I wish people would just analyze the freaking game and stop with all the theatrics about whether this team did or didn't belong. Enough. It's the same lazy argument that already got blown up last week about, so who should have been? Bama? Miami? South Carolina? The bunch of 2-3 loss teams? You know what I mean? Like Miami should have been in after losing to Syracuse and Georgia Tech, who combined for, 8 losses this year. Oklahoma, Alabama should have been with 3 losses, including to a pair of 6-6 teams, won by 21 points. Enough.
The other thing that I don't like about the other argument, and Jersey Bear, I know you're not saying this, right? But you're bringing up a good point for what the other side says. How about we just stop discrediting the teams that won?
Right.
But look, everybody knows how I feel about Penn State too. Maybe they're just good. You know what I mean? Like you have 2 playoff wins by double digits. Just because that happens doesn't mean each team that you played didn't deserve to be there and they are just a bunch of bums and they suck. Maybe they're good. You know what I mean? Like it was the same thing with Notre Dame. Do people realize that Indiana had to score a touchdown, attempt a 2-point conversion, recover an onside kick, score another touchdown, have a successful 2-point conversion to still lose by 10? Like maybe Notre Dame just played really good. Maybe Notre Dame's a good football team. It's not, well, IU sucks. Because at some point, that narrative is going to have to go away. Because if you keep up that trend, like what's it going to be if, let's say Notre Dame beats Georgia and then they have to go on and play Penn State does the loser of that game then not belong? At some point, the buck has to stop somewhere. And it's just that those are the one arguments that the second that a team, they just didn't deserve to be in. And it's like, okay, well, then I don't know who you want the playoffs to be made up of.
Because we've seen Alabama get blown up in the playoffs. We've seen Oklahoma get blown out in the playoffs. We've seen Ohio State get blown out in the playoffs. Like, so why does it not count when they get blown out? And, that's just other teams just really good. But when it happens to Boise State or SMU or Indiana, it's like, they didn't belong on the stage. It's utter nonsense. And it's lazy. It's lazy. And I know that's not what he's saying. His comment is actually giving respect to Boise State. And he's correct. I still think if both teams played a clean game based on what we saw last night, Penn State wins by 7 to 10 points. But it would have been they would have scored at the end of the game to go up 10, instead of it being like it was where they kind of ran away with it. And it was also a much closer game than 31-14. That touchdown at the end was a lot like the Travis Etienne touchdown, Trevor Etienne touchdown, Travis Etienne touchdown. I always get the 2 brothers mixed up. Travis Etienne touchdown at the end of the Cotton Bowl in 2018. When Notre Dame was basically selling out, stop the run to try to get the ball back, and he just creased it. That's kind of how it was last night. But, Penn State was a better team. Now, does that mean I think Penn State's better than I thought they were? No, I thought they were going to win last night by 10, and that's about kind of how it went because they're a better team than Boise State. We said all along Penn State was overrated as a top 5 team, but they're still a top 10 team, still top 10 to 12 team, and belonged in the playoff, just not as the 6 seed. And I also want to, there's people that say you need to reseed. I hate the idea of reseeding. I just, look, you get a bracket, you play that bracket, right? Sometimes it's going to, like, we have this obsession where we've got to find the perfect system, and there is no perfect system. Because if we do reseeding, there's going to be complaints about reseeding. Just, guys, this is what we have right now. And to me, this is better than the old 4-team system, in my opinion, which was, I still think there's better systems out there, but this is what we have right now. And we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel to try to get it perfect, because it's never going to be perfect. And so then, like, what would you have done with reseeding? Now, because Ohio State looked great against Tennessee, they're going to jump way up and re-rank the teams. And now Ohio State, we overreact to that like we overreact to everything else. And all of a sudden, no, it's just like, guys, this is the bracket. Let it play out. It's like Notre Dame is going to have to eventually beat Georgia to win a title. Whether that was first round, second round, semifinals, or championship, right? Penn State is eventually going to have to beat a Notre Dame or a Georgia or an Ohio State, Texas, or Oregon to win a title. Whether that happens first round, second round, third round, championship game. Just let it play out and enjoy the process. And do that. And I think we might be a little bit happier people instead of just always focusing on the things that aren't right about something. Just enjoy what it's a pretty good game last night. I enjoyed watching that game last night. So I'm glad I stayed off social media while watching the game, because apparently the game went way different than what I saw when I jumped on social media.
Super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. I never thought I would say this. I was happy that Michigan beat Alabama and also pumped that Illinois beat South Carolina. And I learned SEC are babies.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Apparently, I just have this horrible obsession and hatred and animosity towards the SEC. I'm like, I don't really have – my issue isn't with the SEC per se. It's with the perception of the SEC and the constant SEC crap that gets driven down our freaking throats about the SEC. It's like, I've said this before. I didn't hate Tim Tebow when he was in college. I just got sick of hearing about him. I hate the way he was covered. I'd be watching a Purdue Indiana game on a Thursday night on the ESPN, and they're talking about Tim Tebow. And I'm like, what the heck does he have to do with the game? Or I'm watching 2 Big Ten teams. What is bad? But if they had Tim Tebow, he would have scored. And I'm like, and I got sick of it. Didn't mean I hated Tim Tebow, had animosity towards Tim Tebow. It just meant I hated how he was covered. And the fact is this notion that, I listened to, I can't remember who it was. I was listening to something, and maybe it was the Sean McDonough. I was re-listening to the Sean McDonough, Greg McElroy discussion at the end of the Notre Dame game. And Sean McDonough was on this anti-Big Ten tirade. I'm not a Big Ten supporter. But he's like, they've only won 2 titles in the last X number of years. We need to stop thinking about how good they are as a league. And I'm thinking, first of all, that has nothing to do with the quality of your league. You can have a great league and not still be good enough to actually have a team that win a championship. You can still have a great league and not have that. And I'm like, what other – so ACC has 3 in the last 10, 15 years. That makes them all of a sudden better than the Big Ten, because they've had 2 teams win a title compared to the Big Ten's 2 teams, but one of their teams won more. It's like, and also, what does the SEC or Big Ten winning championships in the past have to do with this year? And this is the whole point. I've never said the SEC has not been dominant the last 15 years. No, they're not the dominant conference now. Are they the best conference? Maybe. I don't think there's a dominant conference right now. And that's the whole annoying thing. And that's why we get this crap about Alabama being in the boat. You didn't have the gauntlet of an SEC schedule. Well, the SEC doesn't have the gauntlet of the old SEC schedule. They don't. Georgia did. But Alabama's not in the SEC West anymore, where they've got to play A&M and Ole Miss and Arkansas and LSU and name these teams. Plus, they have their crossover game with Tennessee. No, because they have these watered down schedules because they have 16 to 18 teams. So Ohio State's going to have different schedules moving forward. Penn State doesn't have the schedule they've had in the past, because you have 18 teams now. So it's not the same as it used to be. And the SEC supporters get even they're it's so annoying. The crybabies that not Notre Dame fans, but that SEC fans have become. Like, y'all are embarrassing yourselves. Like, it's okay to just say, hey, this wasn't our year. We're just not a championship football team. I've said that about Notre Dame in 2021. Boy, that Notre Dame team doesn't belong in the playoffs. No, they didn't. I said at the time, I'll say it now. I mean, we had shows where we talk about here's their path to a playoff. They're never like, this team belongs in the playoff. No, they beat nobody that year. They got smashed in the playoffs because they probably would have played, Georgia in the first round or Alabama in the first round, and they'd have got slaughtered. That team got smacked around on their own field by Cincinnati. It's okay for me to say that team wasn't very good, right? But it's like Alabama fans can't admit that all 16 of their teams aren't better than every other team in the country. Well, if you played an SEC, well, which SEC schedule? If I played Georgia's schedule, that might be harder for me to win. If I played Ole Miss's schedule, I'd probably win 10-plus games. What would Indiana's record be if they had to play in Alabama's schedule? It wouldn't be worse than 9-3. So, maybe Indiana loses to Georgia, who Alabama beat. Maybe they lose to, I don't know, one other team that Alabama beat, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have lost to Vanderbilt. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have lost to Oklahoma because we saw Indiana destroy teams like that. So maybe their record would have been the same. I don't know. You don't know. So that's absurd. Okay, my guess is as good as your guess because we don't know.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if the basis of any argument for an SEC backer is a hypothetical, you're on the losing end of it. Like, what would Indiana? I don't know, man. I don't know what Indiana's schedule would be.
I think Indiana could beat Missouri. I think Indiana could have beat South Carolina at home. They might have lost to South Carolina at home.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. We don't know what their record would have been. I'd say, okay, let's say that they would have lost at Tennessee like Alabama did. They'd have lost at home against Georgia who Alabama beat, and let's say they would have lost to LSU at LSU. I think those are all fair assumptions. Okay, so they played at Wisconsin. We saw Indiana play teams like Wisconsin in the league, and they dominated them. Indiana would have dominated Wisconsin. They'd have beat Vanderbilt on the road. They'd have beat Mercer. I think they would have beat Oklahoma. They would have beat Auburn. They would have beat South Florida. They would have beaten Western Kentucky. So now we're getting down to would they have beaten – South Carolina at home and Missouri at home and at Oklahoma? I think so. You guys got to stop being hung up on the IU on the helmet and look at the team. Break down the team, which we did. I kept telling this is a good football team, guys. This isn't the Indiana of the past. They played a soft schedule. Yeah, and they destroyed that schedule. It's Indiana. It's like just enjoy the games. And I get some 9-3 Alabama team in there. Why? Let's say somebody's like, oh, based on how Jalen Milroe played against Michigan, I wouldn't want him at Notre Dame. Guys, this is not the first time Jalen Milroe played a game like that. You know what I mean, Trev? This is not the first time Jalen Milroe's gone out in a game and looked terrible. Did you watch the Oklahoma game? He was way better against Michigan than he was against Oklahoma. And we wanted that in the playoff, and there's some Notre Dame fans that want him in the portal. Some guy was like, you're telling me you'd pass up on Jalen Milroe for a redshirt freshman who never played? And I said, hey, look, C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchey have the same number of playoff wins as Jalen Milroe.
And Steve Angeli has one more postseason win than Jalen Milroe.
Bingo! Give me a break. They are babies, Tyler. You nailed that.
Another super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. Do you have any favorite transfer portal pickups so far for other schools besides Notre Dame? And do you have one that left scratching your head?
I think I've said this before. I think I've said that in the past that I think Kevin Concepcion's an overrated player. They act like he's like this top elite player, and I don't think he is that. But take that aside, I think that's a great pickup for Texas A&M. That's one that kind of pops in my head because I look at it, Trev. It's like they don't have that type. You could say, like, okay, the Terry Bussey kid could be like that, but they need that kind of receiver in their offense. And Colin Klein he's done really well with those type of receivers at Kansas State. And so I think that's one that kind of pops in my head. The one that left me scratching my head is the Duke taking the Tulane kid and allegedly giving him $4 million a year. And I'm thinking, I watched that kid play, and he's a good group of 5 quarterback. But did you guys watch the Army game? I don't get it. I really don't get that one a lot. I think Fernando Mendoza picking Indiana. I'm just kind of going through some of the top-ranked guys here. I think Fernando Mendoza picking Indiana is a really good pickup for Indiana because he gives them something that they didn't have with Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke's really smart, accurate. Mendoza has a stronger arm. He's a much better athlete. He gives them a guy that can maybe do some things with his legs when things are breaking down, which Curtis Rourke did not have last year, and I think they need, in my opinion. So I think that's a big pickup. Just going down here through a couple others just that popped in my head. LSU getting Nick Anderson's a nice pickup. He's one of the better ones that they got if he can stay healthy. Let's see here. Deuce Robinson going to Florida State was interesting. Like they're looking for the next Johnny. They're looking for Johnny Wilson, and that's what they got is another Johnny Wilson. That's what Deuce Robinson basically is. 6'6", 220. I thought that was a good pickup. Smart pickup by him. Miller Moss going to Louisville is a very good fit. I'm curious if they're going to allow a quarterback battle there, though. If they do allow a real quarterback battle, I don't think it's a given that Miller Moss wins that job. I'll just say that. I think Ohio State got a nice tight end and Max Clare. I think he's a good football player. That was a nice pickup. Oh, and here's one of my favorite ones. Michigan getting Justice Haynes was a great pickup.
That's what I was going to say. That was my favorite.
Yeah,
transfer portal pickup.
That's
such a
great
good
pickup. And he the fit part, Trev, is go ahead and talk on that because I think the fit part is like he fits what they like to do to a T running the football.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a between the tackles guy. He's a downhill runner, good at getting north and south, very physical runner. I mean, I know we just spent some time bashing the SEC, but I mean, he was a starting running back in the SEC. Like that accounts for something.
Who they did not use appropriately.
Right.
Like they didn't use him appropriately at all. I loved this kid coming out of high school.
Yep. So, I mean, it's a good fit. And I mean, obviously Michigan loves to run the football, mostly because that's their identity. Also partially because I don't know if they can physically throw the football, but it's a really, really good fit for him. I mean, he's a strong runner, and he kind of reminds me of like a Khalil Mullings. Like he'll get the extra yards. I think he's more athletic than Khalil Mullings is. So I think it's a great fit.
Here's two more that I liked. One is Clemson got a good portal pickup, and Will Helt, the DN from Purdue. I think they needed that kind of long, athletic edge rusher. All their guys were kind of power guys on the D line this year. They didn't have anybody that I thought could just come off the edge, and I think he has a lot of that potential if he get coached up right. I think he's a very good portal pickup in my opinion. And then the other one that I liked is Nebraska got the Naziah Hunter kid from Cal. He gives them a take the top off the defense kind of guy on the outside. He had a really nice year for Cal. I think that's another one of my favorite portal pickups. I mean, there's others. I'd have to go through everybody's lists of pickups. I plan on doing something like that in the offseason, kind of grading the portal classes. So I'll have a better sense of who went where, but there's a lot there's a lot of guys. Like, the portal's not over yet. Like, so the window for the portal that closed this past week is just to go in. You don't have to decide. And then of course, as these teams as their season ends, all these playoff teams, once their season ends, they have like 5 days, 7 days, something like that to now jump in the portal. So once their season is over with. So like the loser of tonight's Sugar Bowl game, the loser of today's Rose Bowl game, and what's Peach Bowl, right? It's the other one being played today. The loser of those games automatically, there's like a 5 to 7 day window where their players can now jump in the portal. So we'll see more jump in then. But yeah, I don't know that I've seen a ton of them that left me scratching my head. I think what leaves me scratching my head with some of these is, why did that guy jump in the portal? And others are like, okay, why is that kid getting that kind of money? That's more of my reaction than like, wow, I can't believe that guy picked that school. That's crazy. Or why would that school take that kid? I don't understand. I haven't had a ton of those that I've noticed just yet. It's more about they're paying that kid how much? That's interesting. Or why'd that kid jump in the portal? Like Eric Singleton, you just downgraded in program. You got your money, but you just downgraded as far as the system that you're playing in and who you're being coached by.
He was the one player that I was gonna bring up and just be like, that's the head scratching one to me. You leave a Georgia Tech team with a really good coach and a good system. And it's not like he wasn't the guy.
Right.
There. You know what I'm saying? Like you see that sometimes. Like sometimes players will like take a step back and go to a different program that might not be as high caliber or might have not had as much success as the original team that you were on, but you get to be the featured guy.
Right.
He was the featured guy on a better football team, and now he's that's the one that it's one that I don't really get. But
yeah,
I guess dollar signs talk louder than fit for some.
Which is a very short-sighted way of looking at it, because it's if I get 1.3 million at one place and 950,000 at another, but this place is going to give me a much better shot at kind of developing myself to get to the next level, then you give up a little bit in the short term to get more in the long term. Some of these kids are just taking the biggest bag they get now, and it's stunting their development, and it's hurting their long-term prospects. And that's a very short-sighted. And honestly, because we have an agent system that is completely unchecked, I know this for a fact. You have agents that are basically just convincing kids to jump in the portal, not because it's best for them. You don't have a whole lot of agents that are just talking kids into staying. Hey man, stay where you are. You're in a good situation. No, they want their players to get in the portal because that's the only way they really make their money. And it's pretty disgusting.
Super chat from Barbecue Pitmaster. Thank you for the super chat. Do you think Love becomes the feature back tonight? Price has been darn good too, but at some point, do you need Love featured full game?
No. Like, I don't understand why we continue to have this conversation. I mean, in big games, there have been times when it's Jadarian Price that sparks the offense, not Jeremiah Love. Go look at the Texas A&M game, right? No, they need to keep doing what got you here. There's nothing that drives me more nuts than when you get on the big stage, you go away from what got you there. No, Jeremiah Love, could there be a game where Jeremiah is hot and you need to ride him? Sure, there could be that game. And if that happens, then you do that. But like, guys, what they're doing has worked. Jadarian Price is averaging almost 7 yards a carry. When Jeremiah Love got injured against USC, Jadarian stepped in and went for 100 yards and helped lead them to victory. It's just like, no, Jeremiah Love is the featured back. He already is the featured back. He rushed for 1,000 yards this year. But you also need to make sure that Jadarian Price is getting his as well, because they bring different skill sets to the table, and you have to play to both of them. I don't get why we keep having this question. Like, how do you watch what we've seen this year and say to yourself, they got to stop doing that? It's like, we don't hear a whole lot more about, hey, why you keep playing Aeneas Williams? Because now he's proven himself, No,
I get it. I mean, look, this might be, I don't know, the cop-out answer, but like, I don't care. I just want Notre Dame to win. If that's Love touching it 30 times, if it's Price touching it 30 times, if it's Leonard running it 30 times, like my takeaways from when Notre Dame wins is not, yeah, they won, but it wasn't how I wanted it to look. So now I'm not as happy. I think that's goofy. I do. I'm sorry. Like and Barbecue Pitmaster, thank you for the super chat. Like, I'm not saying that this is what you're saying. This just kind of sparked this thought organically from your super chat. But it's just, I think too many people get hung up on how it looks. I don't care how it looks. I don't care if Notre Dame wins tonight kicking 9 field goals. I don't. Who cares? You advance.
They could win 3-0 for all I care.
Literally. I mean, it just doesn't matter to me. I don't walk away feeling any more or any less satisfied with a win. Now, if Notre Dame loses, this is the stuff that we go dive into. What was the share of the carries? What did that look like? What if they win? Who cares? It could be Keedron Young. They could line up in triple option for all I care. As long as they win, I don't care.
They can win with all their. I mean, because one thing that did frustrate me early in the year that I think held the room back is they would put Devin Ford in the game, and I thought that limited. But they stopped doing that. They adjusted, and what they're doing now works. Look, Trev, I have no problem answering for things that we say. We get things wrong, right? We come on here every single day. We do mailbags. We do this. We do a lot of predictions. We're going to get things wrong. I will not tolerate. That's a strong, but I'm not going to sit here and have people say that we said things we didn't say. Here's an example. JC Bodie. So Penn State was not a good team all year. Now they are. So explain why you changed your tune now. We didn't. You might not be able to understand what we said, but this is not even close to accurate. Here's what I said all year. Penn State's an overrated football team. I think Notre Dame would smack them. That's still true. We always said they're not a top 5 team. They should not have been seeded where they are. I also said they should have been like an 8 to 9 seed in the playoff. They should have been a playoff team. They should not have been seeded where they're seated. There's a big difference in saying they were not a good team. They were an overrated team all year. They're not on the same level as the top teams in college football. But we are also going to give them credit when they prove otherwise. So when we watched them play against Oregon, we both said, I'm surprised at what I saw, how well they played, what they did to SMU. It was mostly SMU, what they did last night. So because I say that Penn State's, if I did say Penn State was not a good team, hypothetically, which I didn't say, so they're an overrated team. They are. They still are. They beat Boise State and SMU. They were better than both of those teams. But let's just say I did say in the middle of the year, I think Penn State sucks. They're not a good football team. And then they go out and play like a good football team. I'm supposed to just still hang on to what I thought about them before? Or here's the thought. Like any good analyst, when the evidence tells you something has changed, you then go with the evidence. So if I did change my tune, it would be because they're playing better football. Just like if you'd asked me on September 8th, is Notre Dame a national championship caliber team? I'd have said, heck no. They just lost to Northern Illinois yesterday. What changed your tune? They blew out their next 11 opponents. That's what changed my tune. But I never said they were not a good football team. They're not an elite football team. They were overrated. They're still overrated. They should not be the 6th seed. They should not have got the easy path that they got. But I still said they should have been a playoff team. So if you're going to criticize what I say, that's totally fair game. Totally fair game. But at least be accurate with what I'm saying.
Super chat from Charlie Weiss, last belt loop. Thank you for the super chat. Happy New Year, IB Nation. I'm ecstatic to see the domination Notre Dame will show tonight. Coach Freeman is the guy. He gets it. With him winning Coach of the Year, does that help with recruiting as well? Thank you.
I don't know that helps with recruiting a whole lot. I don't think that all of a sudden kids are going to be like, oh, you won one of 5 head coaching awards. I doubt he wins all of them. You know, what's going to help with recruiting, honestly, is Notre Dame winning tonight. That's what's going to help with recruiting. Like, let's say Notre Dame goes out and loses to Georgia tonight. Is Notre Dame going to be able to go into the house of a kid or get on the phone with a kid or talk to a kid or parents who are looking at Georgia and Ohio State, Oregon, and Notre Dame and be like, yeah, I know we lost to Georgia and those, 2 of those teams advanced and that team won the national championship, but hey, I got Coach of the Year award. I can promise you that will not be part of Marcus Freeman's pitch, to go get prospects and players. Now, if they win tonight and, keep advancing, then that's part of the whole, hey, look what's going on at Notre Dame right now. We beat Georgia, we beat USC, we beat Texas A&M, we're in the national semifinals. Okay, we beat Penn State, we're playing for the championship. Our head coach is Coach of the Year. Our special teams coach got, coordinator of the year there from Football Scoop, Al Golden. Freaking better win the Frank Broyles Award. I mean, those are all part of it, but those have to come with wins, right? I mean, and it until you get those wins, the needle doesn't move from where it is right now. Like Notre Dame's already recruiting at a level that's higher than they've recruited since Lou Holtz was head coach over the course of the last 3-4 years since Marcus Freeman's been here. That's why the roster is what it is. And now, can the roster get better? Yeah. Does it need to get better? Yeah. How does it get better? You got to show that you're that program. You got to show that you're on the same level as Ohio State and Oregon and Georgia and Alabama, teams like that. The Alabama puzzle, I think they've kind of figured out a little bit with some help from Alabama. But now the Georgia puzzle, look. So let's say Notre Dame loses. Hey, but guys, we've lost to Georgia 3 straight times in the last decade. But, hey, look, they've all been close losses. Okay, well, I'm going to go over there and barely beat you. instead of going to play for you and barely losing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how it's going to be. So really, it doesn't hurt, Charlie. I'm not saying it hurts at all. It definitely is just another feather in the cap for Marcus Freeman. You know, I think that combined with the extension is going to quiet some of the negative recruiting against Notre Dame, which is, well, he's not even going to be there. Have you seen all the NFL stuff about him? Ohio State comes open, he's going to Ohio State. That's now quieted down. Hey, we know Marcus Freeman's a great recruiter, but can he coach? That's all been silenced. And that has moved the needle a little bit. But from where it is now, I don't know that doing that necessarily moves the needle. It's beating Georgia is going to move the needle. If you lose to Georgia the same week you get named Coach of the Year, nobody cares about you being made Coach of the Year. And Marcus Freeman is not going to be using that on the recruiting trail, I doubt.
No, I'm with you. I don't think it's that big of a needle mover. I also just don't think it's a detriment, right? I mean, it's I'm pretty neutral with it. I'm with you.
Yep. All right. I think we have one more super chat here.
Super chat from Big Hoss. Thank you for the super chat. Absolutely no disrespect to Riley Mills at all, but hearing sports experts on ESPN saying Notre Dame lost its best player on defense in Riley Mills is crazy. Okay,
so I don't know what they said. I don't listen to ESPN, and unless somebody sends me a clip, can you hear this nonsense? I've given up on them. Some of it you can't avoid, but I just don't listen to it all the time. So I don't know what was said about it. But if they said they lost their best defensive player, that's a little nutty. They definitely lost their best defensive lineman, though. And I think you could argue they definitely lost their second best defensive player. So I don't think it's like, I guess I shouldn't say it's nutty. You know what the reality is, Trevor? There's some people that really haven't watched a lot of Notre Dame this year. And the first full game they watched at ESPN, and the first really full game they watched was the Indiana game, or at least the first full game since the opener. So they see Riley Mills dominating, and they're probably thinking that's their best player. Well, he was against Indiana. He was their best. Him and Xavier Watts were their two best players. You could argue until he got hurt, Riley was the most impactful player in that game. I think that's a very fair case to make. But it wasn't their best player. But it doesn't take away from how big of a loss it is. And so we can focus on them saying he's their best player and hammer him for it, because that's a bad take. But the take is still they lost a dude in Riley Mills. And that's really the takeaway. And that part they're spot on about. If somebody was being hyperbolic about losing their best player, okay, that's a bad take. I mean, their best players, the guy that was a first-team All-American on 4 of the 5, All-American list, consensus All-American for the second year in a row. Last DB at Notre Dame to do that was this guy named Todd Light. He's pretty good, So I wouldn't get too caught up on that. But, I mean, it's not surprising. But, look, in all fairness, too, a lot of those shows are meant for entertainment purposes. And sometimes you give some hyperbolic comments like that to add a little bit to your conversation. I mean, I don't love it, but I get it. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I can almost guarantee you the context was balancing out them talking about Georgia being without Carson Beck. Like,
Sure.
What are the storylines for this game? Georgia's without Carson Beck, their starting quarterback through 13 games, and Notre Dame just lost their best defensive player. And I could see it being something like that for sure.
There's a question in there about Quinn Ewers and Notre Dame. You guys are killing me. Absolutely killing me. I don't know how many times I got to say it. Notre Dame is not going after a portal quarterback. They're not going after Quinn Ewers or Jalen Milroe. Notre Dame did not offer them $6 million. And if you listen to someone who told you that Notre Dame did that, hit the unfollow button, because that person is not worth listening to ever again. All right. I want to speak on this one, Trev, because this was interesting last night. We were at the restaurant when this happened. Yeah. And I look up and I see Shane Beamer losing his ever-loving mind, which he does like every other game. That guy's got serious anger issues. Like, he needs to see Jack Nicholson this offseason about that a little bit and get with Adam Sandler about what worked for him. But Broke Neck Boy says, what was the issue between South Carolina and Illinois? By the way, it just means more right. Let's go, Duke. Love that one, by the way. Duke plays Ole Miss, right? I think Duke's going to get smashed by Ole Miss, but we'll see. Because I know Jackson Dark's playing in that game, which I was happy about to hear. Yeah. I like when kids finish what they started.
Me too.
What was the issue between South Carolina and Illinois? So basically what happened was South Carolina ran a fake like a kickoff and a fake where the returner basically went like this. It's not considered a fair catch, but he go like this. But what the kind of the unwritten rule in sports is if you know the returner goes like this and it lets everybody know the ball's gone, and so you stop running. Well, apparently I didn't see the play. So, but apparently the returner for South Carolina did this, and it was to psych out the Illinois team, and then they returned it. Correct? Like, I didn't see the play, but that's what. So Bielema is going over there, going like this, kind of making that gesture, because this thing is like, dude, there's a reason this is an unwritten rule, and it's about player safety. Because if you can minimize some of the banging that goes on kickoffs, that's kind of the reason we're doing this, so that we don't have to get the full contact on what has been reported on all the time is the play where more injuries happen per play, per time on the field on kickoffs than on anything else. And you're trying to use that to psych somebody out. Like, that's outside of the spirit of the rule. Like, Notre Dame's done some trickeration this year on kick returns and punts and stuff like that within the rules. They're not faking like it's play over, stop running, and then you do something. That's not dirty play, but that's shady. That's disrespecting the spirit of the game. And Bielema called him out on it, and Shane Beamer lost his mind. Absolutely. And like, you ever notice this kind of, like, I've watched him in 2 bowl games now, and I've seen him lose his mind in both of them. Because I watched him lose his mind a couple times against Notre Dame as well. Like, bro, you got some emotional issues you got to deal with. And then you wonder why your team always loses these games like this at the end of the game, why they make some of the mistakes they make, because you are out of control emotionally, and your team is going to feed off of that. Remember some of the big penalties they got late in the Notre Dame game? Hey, bro, they're feeding off their head coach. I think Shane Beamer's done a lot of good things in South Carolina, a lot of good things. But my man has got to chill. He's got to. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I'm not trying to be pithy. I'm like, dude's got to chill. Like, he can't act like that, or he's going to cap his program, because they're always going to have his level of emotional undiscipline. And he's going to have to be like, look, man, it's great to be passionate. I'm not saying I want you to be a stoic, chill guy on the sidelines, but you can't have these breakdowns that you have in games. Like, dude was trying to fight Brett Bielema. Well, he was acting like he wanted to fight Brett Bielema. If he wanted to get to Brett Bielema, he would have got to Brett Bielema and would have got pounded, by the way, by Brett Bielema. I'm not a huge Brett Bielema fan, but I'm not meeting that guy in an alley and brawling with him. It's not happening. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, that's basically what it was, Trev. Anything else to add to that? Did I miss anything?
No.
Discussed?
No, that's, you hit the nail on the head, but I'm just tail end of the mailbag question. It does mean more. Let's go Duke.
Yes.
Now.
Yes.
That's going to be the one.
Go well for Duke.
I don't think so either.
Don't think that game is going to go well for Duke.
Jordan Schreiber, would you have preferred this year at Notre Dame been Brady Cook, Drew Aller, Tyler Buckner, or Riley Leonard leading the Irish?
It's the easiest question I've had answered so far. It's Riley Leonard, the guy that led him. There it is.
Yeah. Next question. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Carlos Garza.
Easy one, Jordan.
Yep. Do you think that it's fair that the ESPN network has a majority of the playoff games? Seems to me that they're too close to some conferences and made some bias to those.
I have no problem. Like, I'm not in the fairness thing. Look, they bid for it. They're willing to pay for it. No other network is willing to pay for it. So, it's business. My issue, however, is that, yes, they do have too much control over the narratives that are created. I think that they have become very agenda-driven, which bothers me. As opposed to, like, look, yeah, we cover the SEC, but we're going to call balls and strikes. It's like, if you're an umpire and you grew up a Cincinnati Reds fan, it doesn't mean that you are naturally going to always give Cincinnati Reds favorable calls when you're an umpire for their team. No, because you have integrity. You want to do your job well. That's more of my issue with ESPN. It's not that they have all the games, it's that their leadership has no moral integrity to say, hey, listen, look, yeah, we've got business dealings here, and here, but we're also, we're in this, that we care about the sport that we're paying a lot of money for. And so we're going to make sure that we're, doing what's best for the game, not necessarily what's best for our immediate bottom line. And so I think there's just a lot of laziness there. And I think in a lot of ways they've really hurt the sport with some of this stuff, Trevor. And I think that's a problem. And I do have a problem with that. I do have a problem with how they cover the sport and the narrative. They become so narrative driven instead of like just reporting the news. It's like I say, like to like network news. It's like, hey, Fox, hey, CNN, hey, NBC, you guys want to be respected again? Just report the news. Just call balls and strikes. If a Republican deserves to be criticized, criticize him. But if a Democrat deserves to be criticized for the same, then criticize him. Just call balls and strikes and people will get back to loving you again. Like, that's really what people want, Trev. I just want you to be honest. I don't want you to say this about this president, but when a president of the other party, and this is true, that's why I mentioned Fox and CNN, because they both do this to the opposite side. It's like, this was a problem when this guy that you liked did it. Why are you not going after this guy when you didn't go after that guy for the same exact thing? It's because it's agenda-driven, and that's what people are sick of. And it's the same thing in sports. People are sick of the agenda-driven coverage. I just want you to tell me, break down the Notre Dame Indiana game I saw very little breaking down of the game. It was all the narrative crap from Herb Street and all those people like that at ESPN. There was some really good analysis from some of the side people there, like Greg McElroy, I thought gave good analysis of the game. But he's not one of the drivers of the narrative like a Kirk Herbstreit and Reese Davis and those other people who clown themselves. So it's not about fairness. They paid for it. They earned it. They deserve it. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But we can still call them out for the fact that they hurt the integrity of the game, but you're starting to see a lot more pushback against it from not just fans, but other national outlets that kind of, and I think part of it is because people see blood in the water, and there's been people that were afraid to go after the mothership in the past that aren't now. And I think that's part of it, but they're getting blasted for it. And I just hope that people continue that. That's going to be the key, is don't let up. Don't let up.
Yeah, I agree. I think the frustrating thing about bias is like there's always going to be one. You know what I mean? No matter what, like you mentioned, different various news outlets and all that. I mean, I am a part of the, I don't even know how to describe it. Like I'm a part of the crowd that wants to hear the balls and strikes.
Right.
Unfortunately, I believe that the majority of the people just want to hear what they want to hear. I genuinely believe that. I think that most people want to just be told that their belief is correct. They don't want to hear the real. That's why I think it's gotten so polarized.
Yeah, I think we're told that. But there's a reason that the ratings for Fox and all these networks are down, because I think I think there was a time for that. There's a time, but I think now there's more people that are just like, look, just shoot it to me straight. I can go listen to an opinion piece, right? And here's the thing, like take Fox. People know that I'm tend to be a conservative. Let's take Fox News, right? Like I don't mind that there's shows that give analysis and sort of pro right leaning arguments in opinion shows, but then there's the news shows, and those should just be, here's the deal, here's what it is, and there needs to be that balance, and there isn't. And the same thing in sports. I'm good that ESPN has opinion pieces. I'm good that they have some of the things where guys are giving back. That's good. That's fun. People want that. But when you're reporting the news, report the news, right? Don't everything doesn't have to be about your agenda. You're very clear and obvious. They used to, I feel like maybe they used to hide it better. I don't know. But I mean, and maybe that's how it was for a while, Trevor, but I do think it's starting to turn. I think it's starting to turn a little bit, that more and more people are like, look, I was told this, and now that's not true. And I just think there's a lot of things that have happened in the last 4 or 5 years that people are like, dude, you sold me something and I believed you, and I'm not going to get burned twice. And I think that's kind of bleeding into sports as well. And maybe that's what's going on right now with ESPN. But I do think there's more people that are willing to say, that's bull crap.
Sure.
And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I mean, that's how if we say something dumb on this show, call us out on it. That's fine. Just be accurate with what you're trying to call us out on, right? Everybody has bad takes, but understand the difference between me giving you my opinion and me reporting news. And those two things should have, one should be based on, this is how I feel, this is what I think. And the other one should be, it's not my opinion, this is just how it is.
Right.
And that's the difference. All right. We did have another super chat pop up. Here we go.
Super chat from Rob. Thank you, Rob. Brian, hypothetical. I give the IB Bank $20 million for an Irish Breakdown tailgate building on campus. The only catch, a statue of you teaching me the triple option. Would you do it? Go Irish. Let's get the dub.
Thanks for the super chat, Rob. Yes, I would do that. I did play in a triple option offense, and I did coach in a triple option offense, so I would be able to teach that. But yes, to have a $20 million building on campus and then it's a tailgate building for IB, I could do that. I would never pose in front of it. I would never be like, look at me, I have a statue. But if that's what it took to get an IB tailgate building on campus, then sure. You can have a statue of me teaching you the triple option. That's awesome, Rob. I appreciate that, man. I needed a good laugh today. I'm getting a little cranky with some of the things going on. So it's good to get a good laugh. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you very much. Thank you for the super chat.
Aiden Benami, I think it was big time how many plays Riley Leonard didn't try to force against Indiana. He ran out of bounds or threw the ball away. I think those are big plays, in my opinion.
Yeah, and taking the checkdowns.
Yep.
I mean, look, it's those are the hidden yards we talk about, right? Don't lose yards, gain yards. If you're about to lose 6 and you can save that -6 and make it a 0, that's a win, as he talked about. Yeah, I think those, and he's been doing that a lot this year. I mean, that's part of what's made him so. Even when he was struggling as a thrower early in the year, he was still making those plays. You know, Trev, you and I talked about, like, the offensive line has gotten a little better in pass pro, not a ton better. But a big reason why they didn't give up more sacks this year is because he has done a really phenomenal job all season of avoiding sacks and not getting sacked. And I think that's been something he's been really great at all season, to be honest with you. That's not new. That's not a new thing for Riley Leonard. That's something he's been doing all year. And it is huge. And it's going to have to continue tonight against Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his maneuverability in the pocket has gotten significantly better. He doesn't just look to escape around the outside as much. He's keeping his eyes downfield. It's been great to see.
Yep.
The history expert. What would y'all's scores prediction be if both teams were 100% healthy? No players out for either team.
I think my margin would probably be the same. It'd just be a little bit more points. I'd probably tack a touchdown onto both teams. 31-23 if Georgia was fully healthy and Notre Dame was fully healthy. Probably similar margin. I'd be more confident in Notre Dame winning and winning convincingly, having a chance of winning convincingly if Boubacar was playing and Betelho was playing and Mills was playing and Benjamin Morrison was in coverage and Charles Jagasol was at left tackle. Mitchell Evans was 100% fully go. Yeah, I'd feel – I mean, my prediction would probably be the same, but I'd have a real quiet confidence that this team is going to really wreck Georgia. Just because football is a game of matchups, right? And if Notre Dame was fully healthy, I think the things where I believe Georgia has a good matchup against Notre Dame would be far less of a problem. If Boubacar, Betelho, and Riley Mills were all playing, Jason Onye was still part of the rotation. I think Notre Dame would match up really well in this game. I mean, honestly, if that was the case, I'd be like, Notre Dame is a clear favorite to win it all if every team was 100% healthy. It'd be Notre Dame and Ohio State in the national championship game. No doubt in my mind. If Ohio State's offensive line was fully healthy and Notre Dame was fully healthy, I'd be like, okay, these next couple games are going to be fun to watch, but get ready for that Buckeye-Irish game here on the 20th because that's what it's going to be. That's my take on it. But my prediction would probably be the same. Like, because again, there is a level of, until you can beat a team like this, there has to be some level of skepticism about how well Notre Dame can play on the stage until they show it. There is that. There is that. But to me, I am factoring that in my prediction. I am factoring into my prediction that I do think the offensive line is going to struggle tonight. I do. I said that. But I don't think it's going to be struggle enough to where Notre Dame loses, but it could. Certainly could. But if Notre Dame was fully healthy, yeah. And that includes, okay, but they'd have Carson Beck at quarterback, and they'd have, cool, that's fine. I'm telling you, man, like if this team would have stayed healthy, this team would have been a major problem. a major problem for people. Like, even if you just give me the defensive linemen, I mean, whew, boy, that'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my score prediction is I think Notre Dame's offense scores the same amount of points and they hold Georgia to fewer. I don't care if they have Carson Beck. He has shown at times this season that he is more of a turnover machine than he is who he was in their final 3 games, in my opinion. And if you add in Boubacar Traore and Jordan Botelho and Riley Mills and Jason Onye and Ben Morrison to that mix, I don't see them scoring more points against that defense opposed to because the way that I look at it is Carson Beck adding him equivalent to Notre Dame getting all of those guys back? No.
Yeah.
So my score prediction is the same for Notre Dame.
And there's some other guys for Georgia that are out or are banged up. You know what I mean? Like their D line's been a little banged up, their O line's been a little banged up, but like you said, Trev, it doesn't move the needle a whole lot for me. It really doesn't. I don't even want to think about what they would be if they were fully healthy. And I mean, I guess there's another part of it too. Is would they have developed the same as a team if they didn't have to kind of deal with some of that adversity? Would they have developed the mental toughness? I mean, that's a fair counter. If I were to try to counter what I'm saying, did they need that type of adversity to become the team that they are? It's a fair question. But even if you just said, okay, you give me everybody that's been, if I could start on November 1st and nobody got hurt after that, and so Howard Cross is fully healthy and Riley Mills is fully healthy, and that's the only difference. Still no Benjamin, still no Boubacar, still no Jagasol, still no Jordan Botelho. I'd still have a similar feeling. If Cross and Mills were both healthy for this game, I'd feel a different way about it, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Super chat from John A1. Thank you, John. Will Riley Mills and Howard Cross's on-field success and All-American status move the needle on the defensive tackle recruiting trail? If not, is NFL draft success the only needle mover in that regard?
Yeah, pretty much. That and money.
Yep.
D tackles are like the quarterbacks of offense. They're going to get big money because there's just not a lot of them. There's not a lot of really dominant interior defensive linemen. There's a lot of good players. I think Notre Dame's going to get a guy at the position that I think is a good football player. He's going to help them, in my opinion. But it's not like you're replacing Riley Mills with another Riley Mills.
Right.
There just aren't a lot of those guys out there. And when they are, they command big money. And so basically that's what's going to be for Notre Dame is that's at some point in time, they're just going to have to be willing to pay for that, just like they had to do with getting Riley Leonard. I mean, Riley Leonard didn't come to Notre Dame for free. He might have, but he didn't. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the reality of it. And so, but I think NFL draft success helps to where, okay, this school offered me $1.5 million. You're only offering me $1 million, but I'm going to come play for you because I know that you're going to put me into the first round of the NFL draft. I think there's something to that. But I still think that the NFL draft is a big, big part of that. NFL draft and money. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of start looking at the other positions Notre Dame has had success in the NFL and how that translates over to recruiting, offensive line, tight end, now running back a little bit, especially with Kyron Williams doing what he's doing. So, yeah, I would say I think NFL draft success is probably
and NFL success.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Stephen B with a super chat. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for the season, guys. The real test comes today.
No doubt. Thanks for the super chat, my man. You're absolutely correct.
Super chat from Harold Eustache. Thank you for the super chat, Harold. Do you think Aeneas Williams will get significant playing time in this game like he did in the Indiana game?
Well, it depends on, he played a lot in the Indiana game because the situations called for it. He's their third down, 2-minute red zone running back, and there was several of those situations on Saturday that warranted him getting the football. So if Notre Dame's faced with a lot of those situations again, then I definitely think we'll see more of Aeneas. I don't believe that Aeneas was going in there on just base downs a whole lot different than before. It just the situations of the game called for it. And that's why I think he played. But yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is what allows these guys to thrive the way that they do is because they all have their roles and they know their roles. And it's like, hey, man, do your job. You know what your job is going to be. You go into every game knowing I'm going to get in here, I'm going to get in there, and when I get in, this is my job. And I think that's part of what's worked so well for this football team, Trev, is that these kids are going to these games and they know exactly what they're being tasked with doing, and they do it at a high level. And I think that's one of the really smart things that Dylan McCullough has done is, you know, you're not wearing these guys down because they're playing a whole lot. And you're not overwhelming guys with touches and carries and snaps and things like that. But they also have a very clear understanding of what their role is. And they're executing those roles at a high level. And it's really worked for them. It's really worked for him. And, you know, on top of that, he's a phenomenal coach. And so that helps. Certainly helps. Thank you for the super chat, Harold. Appreciate that, man.
Yes, sir.
Let's go back up here to the top. Let's go here.
Jordan Schreiber, why isn't Jaden Harrison or Jaden Greathouse getting more targets? They seem to be the most reliable receivers to me. I don't see them drop many balls.
I think it's quarterback comfort level. I just think the stuff that Riley Leonard's comfortable with is not necessarily in the wheelhouse of getting your slots the football. I really think that's what it is. I mean, we saw in Mike Denbrock's offense, Jaden Greathouse was a beast in spring ball. What changed? He was having different quarterbacks throwing to him. It was Kenny. It was Steve. It was CJ. Riley wasn't practicing. Riley developed a rapport with different players. Just the reality of it. And I'm not saying I like it or it's great or it just, I think that's a big part of it. And I hope that that's what they're reminding of Jaden Greathouse is like, listen, our quarterback next year is going to be one of these three guys that loved throwing you the football in spring. You know what I mean? And that's the selling point. Look, then that's always true, Trev. Some guys are just comfortable throwing certain routes or certain positions. It's not so much that Riley likes Bo Collins more than Jaden Greathouse. It's more of, I like throwing to that boundary position in one-on-ones more than I like throwing into traffic over the middle of the field, especially early in the season when he's struggling. I think that's really more of what it is than necessarily anything specific about Jaden or Jaden. A lot of Jadens. Maybe he doesn't like throwing Jadens. No, I'm totally kidding.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I don't think it's anything as deep as to what you said, like that he doesn't like them. I do think they need more targets because of how reliable they've been within the offense. But you know, that could be something to watch for tonight. But yeah, I don't know. My answer aligns with what Brian's is.
That's good. I like it when that happens.
Jordan Schreiber.
I'm going to do two from Jordan here real quick because I think
Yeah.
they're kind of together. So I'm going to do the next two from him.
Sounds good. If Notre Dame wins, will Georgia be the most confident and sure of itself team Notre Dame meets for the entire season?
No. There's two teams playing in the Rose Bowl. They're going to be just as confident and sure of themselves as they are. And honestly, I would even say Penn State is going to go into that game super confident and sure of themselves. Like the way they're playing right now, like they're not going to be afraid of anybody. I don't think it is going to matter. If Notre Dame plays their game, it won't matter. But no, I mean, anybody that they play in the semifinals or the championship game are going to be just as sure and confident in themselves as what Georgia will be going into this game tonight. No question in my mind.
And then he also asked, would Notre Dame match up better against Ohio State or Oregon?
I personally think they match up better against Ohio State. I mean, they both have receivers that concern you. I feel that Notre Dame would have a better shot at shutting down the Ohio State run game than the Oregon run game. And I think that Notre Dame would have a better shot at getting pressure on Will Howard than they would Dylan Gabriel. And I think that's a big key to what they do. So I think now Ohio State's defense is better than Oregon's defense, but I don't care to get into a shootout. I'd care about it being a little bit more of a lower scoring game. They're both excellent teams. Both would be challenges for Notre Dame, no question about it. Those are the two teams outside of Georgia that I think are on Notre Dame's level, if not better than Notre Dame without Riley Mills. But of the two, I think Ohio State, they're a slightly better matchup against Ohio State than they are Oregon. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, excuse me, for me, it depends on the side of the ball that we're talking about. I mean, Ohio State's defense, their defensive line scares me. If I'm being honest, if I'm Notre Dame's offensive line, like I would be more interested in the matchup between Notre Dame's offensive line versus Ohio State's defensive line than I would for Oregon's. I think Ohio State's D-line poses more of a threat. So, but then offensively, for the other team, I think Notre Dame's defense matches up better with Ohio State's offense. So for me, it literally depends on the side of the ball. Super chat from Alan Watson. Thank you, Alan. Prayers for all the families affected in New Orleans. Am I crazy? If Love was the only back we had, we would have been in Heisman talk. Glad we have all of our backs, though.
I doubt it. I mean, even if Jeremiah Love was getting 15 to 18 touches a game, number one, you couldn't guarantee me he'd even be playing in November in that scenario. Number two, even then, he still would have not even been close to being in the same league as Ashton Genty from a production standpoint. I mean, that kid rushed for 2,600 yards and 29 touchdowns. Even if Jeremiah Love is getting every single carry that Jadarian Price had this season. Like, let's actually do the math here real quick, Trev. So let's say that let me pull this up here real quick. So let's say that Jeremiah Love got all 100 of Jadarian Price's carries, and he did it at his 7.44 yards per carry. He rushes for 1,800 yards right now. Let's say he got every touchdown that Jadarian Price had. He'd have 23 touchdowns right now. He's not even sniffing the production that Ashton Genty put up. You're not going to have two running backs in the Heisman talk. You're just not. You're going to have the best running back will be in there, and then it's going to be quarterbacks and receivers or whatever else. Like, no, he would not have been in the Heisman talk this year, assuming he even stayed healthy all year. Well, now, next year, maybe, Trev, without a running back that rushes for 2,600 yards.
Sure. I mean, the thing that I look at it is the person who's taking away like his touchdowns isn't even a running back. You know what I mean? Like, I think even if Notre Dame didn't have this stable of running backs, I still think Riley Leonard accounts for over 15 rushing touchdowns. You know, so I don't think it's as easy as saying, well, if they didn't rotate in Jadarian Ananias, and you also have to have a quarterback in there that doesn't run for over 700 yards and over 15 rushing touchdowns, right? So, yeah, I mean, I guess in theory, if you gave him Riley Leonard's rushing numbers and his rushing touchdowns and Jadarian Price's rushing numbers and Jadarian Price's rushing touchdowns, and like, yeah, I suppose so, but I don't know if he would physically be walking around right now if that were the case. So that's a lot of touches.
Yeah. All right, let's get back up here. I think that's it for the super chat. So let's go back up here to just your ordinary Joe.
If Riley Leonard goes out, does Steve Angeli come in with a scripted package?
Yeah. I mean, usually your backup quarterback has this is what you run when he's in the game.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even want to think about that if I'm being honest.
Yeah, let's just move on. If that happens, Joe, I'm blaming you. You're my guy, Joe, but I'm totally blaming you.
John A1, can Notre Dame win in the boundary offensively against Georgia in the intermediate zone 10 to 20 yards downfield?
Can they? Yes. It's going to require Bo to play really well. It's going to be Bo against Dalen Everett. Dalen Everett's a talented kid, but he's also young. He's not incredibly strong yet because like most freshmen and sophomores, it's can they win? Yes. Can they dominate it? I don't know that they can dominate it, but I think they can win it. What does winning it mean? Bo Collins has 5 catches for 65 yards. That's winning in the boundary. They can do that. Need to see it, but they can do it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, winning for me is just competitive in the boundary because like that's Notre Dame hasn't even been competitive in the boundary. Guys aren't fighting for footballs. People are losing fumbles. People are dropping passes. I mean, winning for me is it is now just a part of the offense. If I'm just being 100% honest, like that's what a win would be for me. So, yeah.
This is just more of a comment from Iden Benami. He says, biggest three factors tonight, in my opinion, Riley Leonard's legs, the O-line, no turnovers. I
could not agree more.
Yeah. Maybe you could add D-tackle play or D-line play instead of the turnovers. I don't think that if they turn the ball over once, they're going to lose. It's just you can't have you can't have multiple turnovers. I would probably throw D-line in there as the number 3, but I'm not going to push back too hard on that because I think those three things. Because if Riley Leonard makes a lot of plays with his legs and the O-line plays well, and they don't turn the ball over, unless the D-line is just god-awful, which it hasn't been all year,
right?
They're going to win this football game.
I'm in the same boat as you, man. Carlos Garza. Is there a big difference physically between Notre Dame players and what you typically see in the SEC?
Yeah, offensive line-wise and line-wise, I'd say there's still a difference. Not a huge difference on the inside of Notre Dame's offensive line. I mean, Billy Schrouth and Rocco and Pat Coogan are pretty good size. Their tackles are undersized.
Yep.
You know, they're not smaller at receiver. They got big tight ends. Their quarterback's a big kid. Their linebackers have similar size to SEC teams. I mean, they're very similar to what Georgia is linebacker-wise, just size-wise for the outside of Jalen Walker. Secondary-wise, Notre Dame matches up well size-wise with people. I'd still say the tackle position in the defensive line with all the injuries. I mean, if Riley Mills is still playing, it's not as big of a deal. But, their length is very similar to SEC teams. Their speed is very similar to SEC teams. They're still a little undersized. I don't think Georgia's got a big offensive line, but it's not quite like I did this last night, Trev. This is actually a good time to bring this up. Somebody was talking about their D line is all line so much bigger than what Notre Dame has faced all year. I'm like, not really. Here is basically the last 6 games against non-option teams that Notre Dame has played. Here's the average O line, including Georgia. So the last 6, actually, I included Army. I didn't include Navy. So I went back and all the teams that they've played outside of Navy, because who had a small line, going back to the Georgia Tech game. Georgia's average is 316. Indiana averages 312.6. USC averages 320. Army averaged 306.6. Virginia averaged 313.8. Florida State averaged 315.11, and Georgia Tech averaged 311. Georgia's not massively bigger than every offensive line they've gone against. Now, you could say maybe they're a little bit more powerful than some of those offensive lines. Fair. But this is not like this size of an offensive line they haven't seen before this season. They have. And, I mean, their last 2 opponents were pretty big offensive line-wise.
Yeah, I was just about to say USC's offensive line they were big boys. Right.
And I thought Donovan Heinisch held up well, because that was where the conversation went, was about him primarily. And I think he held up well. Now, that means they got to continue playing well, but I don't think that this Notre Dame team outside of maybe tackle is necessarily in a position where they're just, and I mean it on both sides of the ball, they match up well size-wise. Their tackles, a little bit concerning on both sides of the ball because of Riley Mills being out. And ultimately, Trev, I mean, that's where I am still concerned about this game tonight is honestly if it becomes a game of big boys on the D-line and not a game of athleticism and quickness, that's advantage Georgia. If it becomes about where the offensive tackles are getting just dominated physically by Michael Williams and Jalen Carter and Kristen Wilson and Miller and guys like that, then I start to get concerned about is Notre Dame going to be able to pull this one out. So that is still a concern of mine. It really is. It wouldn't have been as much with Riley Mills in there, but with him out, it doesn't mean Notre Dame can't do it. But I'm saying if that's what the narrative is tonight, if that's what the storyline is tonight, that's concerning for me.
Yeah. Yeah. If it turns into just a brute strength game, that's when it gets a little nerve-wracking for me too. Brandon Plensner. Alabama and Ole Miss beat Georgia with having great success in the passing game with over 350 and 250 yards respectively. Can Notre Dame win this game with a different blueprint, or will they need a heavy passing attack?
No, they play their game. I mean, you could say the difference between Ole Miss and Georgia Tech, for example, was not pass game versus run game. It was defense. That was the difference.
Yeah,
I mean, Georgia Tech put up 563 yards of offense on Georgia. Ole Miss put up 396. UMass averaged 6.2 yards, 6.16 yards per play against Ole Miss, or against Georgia. Ole Miss averaged 6.19 yards per play. And UMass threw for 125 yards in that game, scored 21 points. The difference was their defense. They couldn't stop Georgia. So you got to play your game. I mean, Kentucky didn't have success against Georgia. They threw for 114 yards, but they moved the ball on them to a degree because they could run on them. That's what kept them in the game, is their ability to run, especially in the second half. They ran on Georgia. So I don't look at it as, well, these are the two teams that beat them. It's about who played well against their defense. And the two teams that beat them are not the only teams that played well against their defense. Then it comes down to, well, Notre Dame's got a much better defense than Georgia Tech. They've got a much better defense than UMass. They've got a better defense than Kentucky. Those are the differences to me that I look at it. So, no, you got to play your game. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't try to have success in the throwing game. You have to have success in the throwing game. But that would have been true no matter what happened in those games. That's just true for your offense as a whole. So I don't think you need to have a heavy pass attack. Because, again, that gets you out of what got you here. Go with what got you here. And what got you here was balance. And Notre Dame has been balanced. They're not like – sometimes, not Brandon, but some like national people is more of what I'm talking about. They act like Notre Dame's just like this old school team that throws the ball 15 times a game. And I'm like, guys, you know that like Notre Dame threw it 32 times in their last bowl game. They threw it 33 times against Virginia, 30 times against Florida State, 30 times against Georgia Tech, 30 times against Texas A&M, only 23 times against USC because they went 18 of 23. In the game. Only threw it 18 times against Army because it went 14 of 18 and they blew them out. Like, this is a team that will throw the football and they need to be effective throwing the football. It doesn't have to be like the volume isn't what matters to me with the pass game tonight, Trev. It's the effectiveness of it. If they only throw the ball 22 times tonight, they can win the game, but they better average 8-9 yards an attempt on those if they're going to have the success they need to. That's how I look at it. I don't think it's about mimicking what – because even within this, Trev, those two game plans for Ole Miss and Bama looked very different. Very different. Even though you say, well, they threw for X number of yards, they still were very different game plans and how they went about it. The one common theme that I will say between the two is both teams' quarterbacks had success making plays with their legs. That is one thing that was similar. And that is the one thing that I think has to carry over from what we've seen from those two games, more so than passing yards.
Well, here's my thing. I think that there's just this common misconception that when a team loses, the rest of college football just got the blueprint of how to beat this team. Like it's, what Notre Dame doesn't have? Ryan Williams. You know what I mean? Like, do you know what they don't have? A thrower like Jackson Dart. Like, it's not
starting.
Sure. I mean, you know what I meant. I did. So
they also don't have Ole Miss's receiving core. Even though they didn't have Trey Harris in that game, that's still a really good receiving core.
100%. And so I think that there's just misconception on either side, right? There's a lot of Georgia fans saying, well, we lost because teams threw on us and you guys can't throw. And it's like, okay, and teams haven't been able to beat Notre Dame because they can't stop the run, and you guys couldn't stop UMass or Georgia Tech. Each is an equally as shallow of an argument on either side. So, I'm with Brian on this one. It's about passing game efficiency. Riley Leonard doesn't have to go out and throw the ball 45 times for 350 yards for Notre Dame to have a fool's chance of winning this one. That's not the storyline. So I'm confident that it doesn't have to be something like this.
Got to play. Notre Dame is at the point now where it's really just about play your game. I mean, like in the past, they needed to do this, and this to have a chance to win. Now it's just, dude, this is what got you here. If you play your game, you're the better team. If you don't play they don't need to try to be Ole Miss, because what's Ole Miss doing right now? They're getting ready for some bowl game that nobody can even remember what bowl game that they're in, right? I forgot they were even playing Duke. The only reason I remember they were playing Duke is because early in the chat, we had someone say, go Duke, talking about the SEC. So that just, that must mean that Ole Miss is playing Duke. And that's sad that I don't know what bowl game they're playing in. But honestly, I I had no reason to pay attention to bowl games this year because Notre Dame was in the playoff. You know what I mean? But that's a big thing, Trev, is just this is like you said, this is the first time in a long time that Notre Dame got to a game like this where it's like you don't have to go out and be something you're not. Play your game. Play your game.
Jordan Schreiber, did Notre Dame make an NIL run at bringing back Alton Fisher before the draft?
No on Alt. And I believe that there were some preliminary conversation with Blake Fisher, but he was adamant about going pro. And I don't think they really put up much of a fight with either kid. That's not a side shot like, oh, they didn't care about it. At some point in time when you're a coach and a kid is ready for that next step, you support that. It's like, and I was told that I don't know how true this is, but I told that there was a conversation with Joe Walt where he was kind of like came into Marcus Freeman and let Marcus Freeman know he was going pro, and Marcus Freeman started giving him a hard time, and then kind of told him like, I'm just messing with you. You know what I mean? Like, we know this is the right move for you. Like, there was no attempt to talk him back because you knew he was ready. He had nothing else to prove at your level. If anything, he could get more overanalyzed. And so, yeah, would it have been better for Notre Dame for Joe Walt or Blake Fisher to come back? Sure. Would it have been better for Joe Walt for him to come back next year? No. And from everything I've read, following his season, from everything I've read, he's handling himself just fine in the NFL.
He's having a really good year.
So it was time. And as a coach, your job in the offseason, your job is to help your players figure out what's best for them. And with Blake, I think that there was maybe some initial conversations, but Blake was dead set on it's time to go pro. And I don't know that it would have been overly productive to try to convince him to come back because I don't know that his mind and heart would have been in here. Now, would they have loved one or both of them to choose to come back? Yeah. And if Blake Fisher chose to come back this year, I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with
but
you.
Yeah, I don't think there was a big run to get those guys back because I don't think it was necessarily in Joe's best interest. I don't think it was at all in Joe's best interest. And Blake was ready. And when a guy's ready, you support that and you do what you can to help him get to that point. Do I think Blake should have come back? Absolutely. I think Blake could have been a first-round draft pick if he would have come back and done what we think he's capable of doing. But he was ready. And so, okay. I mean, hasn't he started some games for the Texans this year?
Yeah.
I don't know how he's performed. But he started some games in the NFL and he's making more money than he probably would have made for Notre Dame as a second-round draft pick. But, he's the one guy that I thought should have come back. Joe had no business coming back. I was actually told, and I don't know how true this is either, but I was told that Quentin Nelson after the season in 2017, or maybe as at one point in time, was like, maybe I should come back and unfinished business. And he was told by everyone in there, I'm like, bruh, it's time to go. Like, it's time to go. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Everything good?
Yeah. No, I pulled up Blake Fisher's stats on Pro Football.
Okay. Like I said, I didn't say he played well. I just said, hasn't he started some games?
Well,
He needed it. He needed it, though. He needed another year. Joe didn't.
Well, it's the Texans' offensive line as a whole this year has taken a big step back, too. So,
yeah. His what has taken a step back?
The Texans' offensive line as a whole has taken a step back.
They've had a really weird year.
Yeah,
DJ Stroud has really struggled this year. It's very odd.
I think I saw a stat the other day that he hasn't had like a duo of healthy receivers for longer than a stretch of like 3 games.
And that'll screw with a quarterback's head big time, especially in the NFL, man.
Because they went out and got Stephon Diggs. He tore his ACL, but then when he was going off, Nico Collins was hurt, and then Tank Dell has already been ruled out for all of the 2025 season. I told you I don't watch NFL. Apparently the other night the Broncos tied the Bengals with some Hail Mary at the end of the game on 4th down. I get like a million text messages. Oh my gosh, please tell me you're watching this. I'm like, guys, I'm not lying to you. I don't watch NFL. I don't know why nobody believes me. I don't watch NFL. I'm not really a Broncos fan anymore, but I did see the clip of that injury. That was bad. Oh, it's so brutal.
That was bad. And
It's-
anyone giving CJ Stroud a hard time for how he was feeling at the end of that game, y'all don't understand. You do not understand the bond that football players have and teammates have. Is
Right.
Get out of here with that nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
I love that kid's heart. I do. Yeah. If I was an NFL fan, I might be a Texans fan because I really like that kid. Not just as a quarterback, but I just have always liked that kid.
He's just an ultimate competitor, and that's somebody
like a
that I
good
will.
Kid,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like just like a silly, young, just life is good, praise God. You know, I really like that kid, man. I do.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Stroud. John A1, will the Notre Dame offensive line be able to protect the middle in pass pro versus Georgia and consistently give Leonard an area to step forward when pressure comes off the edge?
Don't know. I mean, we talked about this in our breakdown this week, Trev. That's going to be one of the keys to victory, right? I mean, is that right there?
Will they? Do I hope they do? Yeah. But John, like Brian said, that was a big key that we talked about. So, and honestly, on both sides of the ball too, honestly, I mean, the middle of the line of scrimmage is going to be one to keep an eye out on tonight. That's for sure on both sides of the football.
Oh yeah.
Patio Furniture.
First of all,
nice.
I don't love your question, but I love that name, by the way.
Nice. Is Notre Dame's run game and offensive line overhyped due to stats? Love breaks a 98-yard run against IU. Stats after 8 attempts show 92 total yards. Explosives are great, but would like more consistency.
You know, I've heard this narrative at times, and there's times when this is true, and context always matters. But number one, you're using an example from a game against a team that had the number 1 ranked rush defense in the country. Like Notre Dame doesn't have a good rushing attack because their stats say so. Their stats define what we all see on the field. And so like if Jeremiah Love would have gone for 98 yards on 8 carries, that'd have made you feel better somehow. Right? I mean, let's not forget the drive after the 98-yard run. Notre Dame went 16 plays and over 80 yards and took 9 minutes off the clock. Why? Mainly because of their running the football. Jadarian had a 20-yard run, but it was the 2 yards, the 4 yards, the checkdowns. So even if you take away his 98-yard run and then take away the sacks and take away Notre Dame taking a knee at the end of the game, they'd have had 102 yards on 30 carries. Not a great performance. That's still over 30 yards greater than what Indiana gave up on average on the season, and it's only 13 yards below what Ohio State had against Indiana's defense. And then are we going to then say, okay, but if you take away Travion Mullins' 30-plus yard touchdown run at the end of the game, now Notre Dame has better numbers. Like the 98-yard run is part of the game. The fact that they went for 98 and then ran it right down their throat with short gain, 20-yard gain, short gain on the next drive is why Indiana said, we're selling out now to stop the run. And that's why the numbers reflected what they were. But by that point in time, Notre Dame had already jumped on them, and that's when the pass game started to make more plays. For example, Indiana was not a team that did a lot of just pure man coverage on the outside. They just didn't. But the play that put the game away was a one-on-one pure man coverage post route to Jordan Faison with no safety help. Why? Because they were bringing both of their safeties down because Notre Dame ran a play-action pass. Why? Because Mike Denbrock, who doesn't run a lot of play-action, said they are selling out to stop the run. We're going to put this game away right now with this particular play. That worked because Indiana was completely sold out to stop the run. Guys, good football teams can take away your run game if they want to. The question is, can they do that and then stop everything else? That's the challenge. A playoff team like Indiana that has at least 2 off defensive linemen that will be playing in the National Football League, a team that is schematically geared towards stopping the run anyway, can make you have negatives and short gains if they're going to commit all their resources to it. But what they can't do is then also stop you from doing the other things, which is why Notre Dame put that game away. It's because of their dominance on Series 2 and Series 3 with the run game, big plays and chunk plays, like the ground and pound plays, that took 9 minutes off the clock, is why Indiana adjusted and went away from safeties off to now safeties down, and we're bringing everybody. It was because of the success on the run game. So I would say that I think you're looking at this entirely wrong, and they still had 190-plus yards. We kind of joked after the game. There's a 1 point time where he had 5 carries for like 91 yards with a long of 98, right? But that's because they were committed to stopping the run. But then that opened up other things, which is why Notre Dame scored 27 points in this defense, which is, I believe, the most points any offense has scored against them all year, correct? Or no, did Ohio State have more? Because I know Ohio State had a special teams touchdown in that game. Let's see here.
I think Ohio State scored more offensive.
They scored
touchdowns.
31 offensively. And then one of their touchdowns was let's see here. Ohio State they had 38 points. They had a 79-yard punt return for a touchdown. And then they had a 7-yard touchdown drive after a turnover, after a special teams mistake. So Ohio State scored more points, but Notre Dame's offense was more effective against Indiana's defense than Ohio State's was for this reason. And so, no, I don't think the answer to that is true. And you don't do this game after game after game after game after game after game after game by accident because you got a big run here and there. That's part of football. Why is nobody else outside of Boise State ripping off this many long touchdown runs? Because they're not as good. Yeah, but one run for 70 yards inflates your stats. No, it doesn't. That's part of the game. It's part of the game. If everybody else could do it, they would do it. So, no, I push back on this. And I hear a lot of Georgia people saying this also. Well, but if you take away this, I can't stand those arguments. Well, if you take away this, and this, then Notre Dame can't run on anybody. Okay, so if you take away Notre Dame's 3 longest runs in every game, then sure, they're not going to look like a great rushing team. But then do that while taking away every other team's top however many runs. And then where do they rank? About the same place. You know?
Yeah, the takeaway argument to me is silly. I don't really like it because it happened. Like using a hypothetical as something that like takes something away is also silly. Like it's not like the same conversation of like, well, like so-and-so didn't play so-and-so's schedule. It's like, well, if you take away the 98-yard run, this is how many yards they had. Yeah. And if you take away 20 of Notre Dame's points, they only scored 7. What are we talking about? Like, it's stuff like this that it's like, what? And then guess what? Once they stop having explosive runs, if that ever happens, and they play Georgia tonight, and they're getting 6 yards at a time, 7 yards at a time, somebody's going to put a super chat in the post-game show and say, really efficient run game tonight. Would have liked to see the explosive runs that we're used to seeing all season tonight. Great win. Go Irish. And like it's going to be one of those, man. At the end of the day, I don't care how it gets done. I don't care if Jeremiah Love gets 98 yards on one run or in 10 of them. I don't. Right. It all adds up to 98.
And it balanced out. Those 2 drives balanced out. One went 98 yards on one play. The other one took 9 minutes. So if you put those 2 drives together, Notre Dame had back-to-back drives where they rushed for over 100 yards that took over 10, took about 9.5 minutes off the clock. That's about 4.5 minutes per drive. That's a normal drive. And next thing you know, just like that, drives 2 and 3 are touchdowns built differently. And all of a sudden it's 14-0. And this team is the way that they've played all year. Hopefully that doesn't change anytime soon, but the way they've played all year, this team gets up 14-0. They're not losing. They're not losing.
Super chat from All the Smoke. Thank you for the super chat. Do you think Love or Price has a better grouped game against Georgia? Do you think either breaks 100 yards?
I think you meant ground game on that one. I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I mean, if one of them breaks 100 yards, that means it's probably going to be a really good day for Notre Dame. I care more about the total yards. I mean, like, to me, I don't know why there's no scientific analysis to this, Trevor. There's no, like, well, when Notre Dame rushes for X number of yards, they win games, because I think relative to who you're playing, but I just feel like in this game against this Georgia team, with how I think Georgia's going to defend Notre Dame, if Notre Dame could get to 150 or more, I think they will win. Even if it's off of a long run, because that long run will most likely result in a touchdown. I mean, that's the thing about these backs. And that ridiculous Georgia show I was telling you about, they even said, like, look, you got to tackle these guys, because if they're even, they're leaving. Like, if they get shoulder to shoulder with you, they're gone. And I was like, well, at least they got that right. Other craziness, they were taking shots like Notre Dame fans. Oh, no, all Notre Dame fans are old. And I'm just like, okay, dude, whatever. They're my age. You know what I mean?
All Notre Dame
they're
fans
my
are
age.
old.
Yeah, they don't know how to use computers, and they don't know how to leave comments. And I'm like, all right, whatever, bro. It was just some of the most childish stuff. But even these clowns could acknowledge that these running backs are dudes, And so I was like, okay. But I mean, look, does Deezer break 100 yards? I hope so, but I care more about the Q. I mean, if Jeremiah goes for 75 and Jadarian goes for 75 and Aeneas goes for 20 and Riley goes for 30, let's get ready for the Nittany Lions. I mean, like, but it'd be nice. It'd be nice if one of them did, because that would be a good sign. And I think that would be kind of, I don't know, almost like a point proven about the offensive line, which even I have some doubts about. I mean, that's my biggest concern tonight is the O-line. It's my biggest concern tonight is that group right there. If one of these running backs goes for 100 yards in this game, and it's like, not they're down 21-3 with 3 minutes left, and then Jeremiah Love breaks off a 75-yard run. That's when you're like, okay, they didn't really run the ball that well. They got dominated. Georgia was up 21-3. It's like when Will Fuller had that long touchdown pass against Ohio State in 2015.
Yeah.
You're like, guys, the game was over. Like, that was a stat patter. If he has that run earlier, then all of a sudden Notre Dame's not maybe down by 20-some points in the fourth quarter. You get what I'm saying? So, like, yeah, there are times when, like, yeah, the stats weren't as good as the score showed. You got a garbage touchdown and you had a long garbage run that didn't mean a whole lot. Like, you look at Nicholas Singleton's stats last night, it looks like he played just about as well as Katron Allen. But you watch that game, nope. Katron Allen was the dude in the game last night. And Singleton just kind of put it away late with that long run, right? That would be when that would make a lot of sense. So, like, if it's something like that and Jeremiah goes for 100, he was 12 for 25 up to that point in time, and Georgia was up 21-3, and then he breaks off a 75-yarder with 2 minutes left. All right. But if it's like a legit 100 yards where it's like throughout the course of a game, then yeah, I'll be there with you.
Sure.
I'll be there with you. I think they win that game if that's what happens, Trev.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do too. I mean, any combination of what you just talked about, I think all those avenues lead to a Notre Dame dub.
I got a question I want to ask you, Trevor, from my Den Benami. I'm very curious on your thoughts on this. He says, how much better is our run scheme this year compared to last? Not yards, but the plays and execution. It's a very good question, Den.
Yeah, that is. I mean, here's my takeaway. I think the scheme in both years fit the running backs that they had in the backfield. Like I do. I don't know if Audric Estime would have had as much success in this offense. And I don't know. I mean, we kind of saw Jeremiah and Jadarian have success in last year's at times, but Audric was definitely the workhorse. So I personally like this scheme better because I think it leaves more avenues for bigger plays. I do. I like zone running schemes. I think there's a lot that you can do out of it. I like running the ball out of spreading the field. I'm a fan of that. So, I mean, for me personally, I think it's better, but my biggest takeaway is I think schematically what they did in 23 and 24 was tailored to who their running backs were, because you're not expecting Audric to break off the runs that Jadarian and Jeremiah did, but you're not also expecting Jeremiah or Jadarian to each touch the football 20 plus times a game. So that's where I'm at with that one, Brian.
I think you nailed the analysis that the run system fit the running back. I agree with that wholeheartedly. My issue with last year's run scheme, I had nothing wrong with, I had no disagreements with it in theory. There wasn't anything schematically that I had an issue with it last season. My issue, however, was more so with the notion that I don't think it fit their offensive linemen. That is why it didn't always work well against better teams, some of the better teams, and why Audric kind of got shut down at times by some of the better teams is because I don't think the big heavy pin and pull fit the linemen very well. That's kind of an issue that I have with it. I don't think it was something that I think it fit Audric perfectly, but I didn't think they could block it as well in some of the better games. So I don't think the scheme last year was better or worse than this year's scheme. I think the ability to block it at a high level consistently is what was better this year, as Trev said. So I think that's and I think also, like you also said, I think that the scheme fits the backs that they have now a lot better. I think that I would like to see Notre Dame run a little bit more pin and pull in the future, but that's when they have more athletic linemen, when they have more of the Agasols and Lamberts and Will Blacks and Anthony Knapp being inside. Like if Anthony Knapp's playing guard next year, I'm pinning and pulling like a mofo. I mean, because he's a really athletic kid. That's probably a really inappropriate, unprofessional thing to say. But like if Anthony Knapp's my guard, I'm pulling. I'm running screens. I mean, because now that's in his wheelhouse. You know, but I'm not asking Rocco Spindler to do that. That's not a knock on Rocco. It's just about play to the strengths of your players. Mike Denbrock's not asking Rocco Spindler or Pat Coogan to pull a lot. That's why, because he's a smart coach. You know, and last year I think they did a little bit too much of that. And I think part of the issue was Mike Denbrock's not going to be kind of talked into doing things that he doesn't believe are going to work, like Jared Parker was at times. I think Jared Parker at times gave too much deference to his offensive line coach, who likes to run pin and pull. That's what he ran at Wisconsin a ton. I'm okay with that in theory. You just got to have the guys who can execute it, and they didn't have that at guard last year. And they didn't have enough counters to that stuff. Like Clemson, they ran that, and it worked in the first half, and then Clemson made adjustments, and Notre Dame had none.
Right.
And, well, gee, it was working in the first half. We don't know what's happening. Yeah, they adjusted, and you haven't. It's not rocket science.
They adjusted, and you're doing the same thing that you were doing with 15 minutes left on the clock in the first quarter.
Good question, Aiden.
Yeah,
really.
that's a good one.
And that comes down to two, Trev. It's like there's a difference between what my preference is in run game and what works. And I personally like inside zone duo combos with some counters. That's an inside outside zone with duo and counter. That's my preference. But I also think a really well designed, well executed pin and pull scheme is also a thing of beauty if you've got the guys that can execute it. Like there's a difference between what I think is good or not good compared to what I prefer. You know, and that's part of it too. So scheme wise, fine on paper. Like everything Notre Dame did last year, run game wise, schematically would have been really good stuff on a chalkboard or a whiteboard. It just didn't always practically work when you're trying to do it with Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler being the pullers. That's just not. It's not fair to ask them to be something that they're not.
Sure.
Lean into their strengths. And guess what? Mike Denbrock and Joe Rudolph, because he's had to teach it, have done more of that this year.
John A1, last year versus Duke, Al Golden used constant stunts with Mills and Cross to stop Riley Leonard. Now that Mills is out, will Notre Dame need new schematic answers for mobile quarterback Gunnar Stockton?
No. I mean, I think Donovan Heinisch and Gabriel Rubio can execute those. I don't think those stunts only worked because they were somehow fit the specific skill set of Mills and Cross. They're talented players, and they executed that. I don't think that changes a whole lot against Georgia. I think the offensive line is different. I think how they block is a little bit different, and you need to consider that. That's a factor. Like, do the twists and stunts work as effectively against what Georgia does schematically, or can you maybe stunt yourself into a big problem? That's a fear that I have, is you stunt yourself into a big problem against Georgia. So those things are much bigger factors than not having Riley Mills. And again, Duke's run game is different than Georgia's run game. That's another factor. But especially on third down, Trev, like, yeah, you'll see a lot of that.
Yeah, and I also don't know how much they're going to use Gunnar Stockton as a design runner in comparison to what Duke had to have Riley Leonard do. In my opinion, I think they're going to do it some. I just don't think the volume is going to be the same. So that's where I'm at with that one. From PJC 1122, what are your thoughts on Michigan and Illinois beating two SEC teams that plenty of SEC adjacent people thought should be in the playoffs?
I think it's poetic, but here's the thing. I love how all the SEC people now all of a sudden don't care about bowl games. For a decade they've said, well, here's our record in bowl games against other Power 5 teams. Now that you're getting your butt kicked, it doesn't matter. Bowls don't matter. Look at all the opt-outs. Hey, Michigan had more opt-outs than Michigan does than Alabama did yesterday. At the end of the day, does a bowl game loss to Michigan with a roster that doesn't necessarily look like the one you had in the regular season mean that Alabama truly didn't belong in the playoff? No, not really. But the point is but how Alabama played yesterday is why they had 3 losses. This was my whole point. That wasn't an anomaly of, well, gee, look what happens when they don't have that's exactly how they played against Oklahoma. That's exactly how they played against Tennessee for spurts of that game. And that's what matters. It's evidence that these teams are not what you think that they are. South Carolina losing to Illinois is even more impactful because they did have their starting quarterback playing in that game. And so it's like, but does that mean that confirms it to a degree? Yes, because they weren't what you thought they were. And the reason they lost is similar to why they lost games during the regular season. But look, bowl games matter. They're fun. There's a lot of things about them, but you can't have the same takeaways that we used to have from bowl games because the rosters look so much different. The objective of certain teams is different. Some teams are, hey, look, we're playing a lot of young guys. We're just trying to build and get ready for the next year. Well, Miami lost to Iowa State. That proves this. If Cam Ward plays that whole game, Miami doesn't lose to Iowa State. They just don't. So you only take it so far. It's more poetic justice. I'm going to use it to trash talk the SEC, right, as a fan. But if we're giving analysis, it doesn't. But the reason I push back on SEC fans that are just clamoring about it doesn't matter, because that's not what y'all's take was last year or the year before that or the last 10 years when you were having a lot of success in bowl games. Y'all like to point to that. SEC. Now that you're getting your butts handed to you, and if it wasn't for Kirk Ferentz punting on 4th and 2 with why are you punting here in the 4th quarter, they might have been even worse. But that's my thing is if you're asking me my honest opinion as an analyst, it doesn't mean a whole lot about what those teams were or what those teams will be. It doesn't. But from a poetic justice standpoint, I'm going to use your own BS nonsense from the past and throw it back in your face to prove a point, I'm going to do that. I'm absolutely going to do that. But again, with Bama especially, Trevor, this is why they lost to Oklahoma. This is the exact same – man, they lost because Jalen Milroe which is exactly the reason they lost to Oklahoma when he threw 2 pick sixes. Guys, this is why they weren't in the playoff and why they didn't belong in the playoff. That's what that means. Do I care that it was Michigan that beat them? I don't care about that. I think it's funny. Bama finishes 9-4. I like that. But it's poetic justice more than anything else. Because dang well that if Bama would have smacked Michigan and South Carolina would have smacked Illinois, SEC fans would have been running their mouths on Twitter and our message board and in chats all day long. See, this is why we should have been in the playoff. If they'd have hung a 30-point win on Michigan, Bama people and Kirk Herbstreit would have been like, wouldn't you have rather seen that than what we got from Indiana or SMU? They would have, which is why I'm saying, you know what I mean? I'm having a little fun at their expense because of it, because you're hypocrites. Be consistent with your argument.
I'll absolutely have fun at somebody else's expense. Look, if you are going to formulate your opinion on why Alabama should have been in the playoffs because they had the chance to beat Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl Dude, no, I'm sorry. Like I think that's a silly argument to have from a schematic standpoint, Brian, to what you said. Like, I don't hold much weight into it because these teams were both shells of what they were in the regular season. I mean, there's a lot of people that looked really deep into what Missouri did to Ohio State last year in a bowl game, and that was a New Year's Six bowl. And it's like, Ohio State had whatever X amount of people sit out. Like, it's not like that. They didn't play Kyle McCord. They didn't play Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, I think it's goofy. I do.
I will not tolerate the blasphemy that was just put on the board from DK. I've called you out. Maverick is a bad movie. Shame on you, sir. Shame on you. Shame on you. Maverick is a bad. First of all, there's 2 movies called Maverick, and they're both awesome. Okay? The one with Tom Cruise is awesome, and the one with Mel Gibson from back in the day. Did you ever see that one with Jodie Foster? Is Matt? He was a gambler in the 1800s. Great. It's fun. It's hilarious. It's got James Garner's his dad. It's off of James Garner was Maverick in a TV show back in the day, but in the movie they made, Mel Gibson was Maverick, and James Garner was his dad. In the movie, I'm probably giving away some plot points. Hilarious movie. But both Mavericks are good, sir, and I shall not stand for that blasphemy in our channel. I am disappointed in you. You're one of the OGs, and I expect better of you, my friend. I expect better.
I was about to say.
I will not have this blasphemy in our chat. Maverick was a great movie. Shame on you, sir.
That's crazy. What? Listen, just the opening scene of Top Gun Maverick, where it's just a montage of F-18s taken off of an aircraft carrier to Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins. That was worth the price of admission.
Yes, it was.
I left the theater and I was like scrolling on my phone. I was like, how to enlist in the Navy. I was like, listen, like, I'm not qualified enough, but if that movie showed me anything, man.
Yep. Man. I had a brief moment when the original came out, and then I played the Nintendo video game, and I could never land the stupid jet on the aircraft carrier. I was blowing stuff up in the air, but I'd crash every time. I was like, I'm not meant to be. I can't even do it in a video game. I'm not meant to be a pilot. So I blame it on my glasses. I don't have good vision, but there's a million reasons why. The little 3 and out. Sam Levitt now yelling at his running back. It's a good way to start the game there, Sam. Yeah, good. Yell at your All-American. I was actually kind of on board with Arizona State pulling off the upset, but they talked a lot of unnecessary trash the last couple of days. It's almost like you guys just made yourselves kind of unlikable. Y'all pulled a Kurt Signetti. Like, there's confidence, and then you're being kind of a nincompoop. I was going to say something else, but I wanted to be nice.
No, that's something I'm going to have to add to the arsenal. That is hilarious. Yeah, I love Cam Scattaboo. And then seeing him come out in his presser and was like, there's nobody in the country that can stop me. And it's like, all right, guy. All right.
Yeah. I mean, nobody in the country can stop me. Well, then what happened against Cincinnati?
Mm-hmm. Well, and then like Sam Levitt was talking about how he knows he's the better quarterback in this game.
Yeah.
And
what happened against Texas Tech in games you lost where you combined for 135 yards on 35 carries in those games? Kansas State held you to 2.9 yards per carry. They kind of stopped you. Just saying. Yeah, Sam Levitt, I'm the better quarterback. I mean, you may be, but when you got to tell everyone about it, you know.
If you have to say that you are, you're not. And that's not specific to Sam Levitt. Like, you know what I mean? And they just got running into the kicker penalty.
All that. Little funny one here from Bill Walsh. Would you accept the $425,000 gift, but the company needs to be renamed Kane Madden's Irish Breakdown? No. I've turned down a lot more than that for people asking a lot less than that. So, no, I would not do that. I would not do that at all. All right, we're going to keep rolling. There's some really good questions we want to get to, and then we're going to get out of here once we get those done. But we're kind of watching the game also, so we're having a little bit of fun here. But I did want to get to some more questions here.
Yeah, from Stymie. Who was the MVP of last night's Penn State victory? Boise shooting themselves in the foot. The officials for creative officiating are number 44.
Look, I know there were some bad calls last night, but there was also some good calls. I mean, it's not like Boise's the only team got hammered. I mean, Penn State had one driver. Didn't they have like almost 100 yards worth of plays called back because of penalties? You had the one where Katron Allen had the long run that got called back. I think they had another pass play that got called back. I didn't think the officiating was terrible last night. It wasn't good, but it wasn't terrible. And I thought it was like there was the one where they should have called pass interference on the defense. But the penalty that they called that negated that late Boise touchdown, that was a penalty. That should have been called. I mean, it wasn't great, but I've seen far worse officiating this year. The MVP of last night's game, in all seriousness, I mean,
mine's Katron Allen.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, honestly. I mean, you could I thought Tyler Warren had some big plays. His touchdown catch early was a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an absolute thing of beauty. And that's, he obviously went with him. I'm not going to push back on either one of those guys, honestly. I think Drew Aller played, made some money throws. He's not MVP, but Katron Allen was a beast last night. Tyler Warren was a beast last night, but I'd probably give it to Katron as well. And look, defensively, Wheatley had a couple huge turnovers in that game. That helped them put that thing away. I mean, just being right in that spot and having the awareness to get your foot down in bounds when Genty fumbled that ball, it was a really alert, high football IQ play. So, yeah, I'd probably go Katron. He was really – and think about it, he had over 100 yards last night, and he had about, 60, 70 yards called back from penalties. He was really good last night.
Guns and Rosas. Over under 0.5 hurdles for Jeremiah Love tonight.
I hope it's under, but probably take the over. He seems to, now that it's starting to take off, I think he's kind of looking for chances to do that. But wouldn't it be kind of poetic justice to win a playoff game where your guy hurdles another guy on a southern dome, kind of making up for what happened to Notre Dame when Najee Harris did that against Notre Dame in 2020.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That would be poetic in a game that some might say just means more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. I love it.
Mark Avalone saw a recent NFL Network Football Life episode on Kyron Williams. Did he really almost leave Notre Dame after his freshman year? Was it well known and concerning at the time?
I mean, I don't know that it was necessarily. I mean, it was kind of well known that he was thinking about it, but that's not a rare thing. Like, freshmen have that all the time at every level, especially ones that aren't playing a lot. It's your first year away from home. I know Kyron's close to his mom, like I was. That was part of my I mean, I started as a freshman and transferred. You know what I mean? And part of it was being a little closer to my parents. It was about an hour and a half closer to my parents. And yeah. Was it concerning at the time? Not really, because no, I don't know that any of us knew that he was going to be what he turned out to be. I mean, what he was known for as a freshman was dropping a swing pass against Louisville, and then they never gave him a shot after that. So if he would have transferred, I don't think anyone was going to be like, man, your next star running back is now gone. Now, that's what it turned out to be.
Right.
But I don't know that at the time anyone would have been like, oh, woe is us. How are we going to survive now that,
sure,
because it's like, hey, we got Chris Tyree coming in next year. And, but yeah, I don't think that would have been the narrative. It would have turned out that way because I think Kyron would have been successful wherever he went. You can't say, well, he was good because he played behind a really good offensive line. Well, he did, but he's doing it in the NFL as well. You know what I mean? Happy for him. Very happy for him. He's a good player. Great story. Hard worker. Great attitude. Loved being at Notre Dame. Got nothing but far outplayed my recruiting ranking of him. I had him one as the lowest ranked players in that class. When people say, well, what are some you got wrong? I got Kyron Williams wrong. I thought he was going to be his skill set didn't surprise me. I thought he'd be a really nice third down, change of pace type of back, quick, athletic. I didn't think he was going to become the workhorse that he became at Notre Dame. I didn't think he had that in him. And he did. So kudos to him.
Guns and Rosas again. Do you think Cade Klubnik could be a top 5 quarterback next year?
In college football, yeah, I think he can. Like, look, he had a very young receiving core this year. They're going to have a whole nother year to work together. I think he's going to have a lot of his offensive line coming back. You're going to be going into year 3 of your system. They got to figure something out at running back, right? They got to get better at running back. But, yeah, he's got a shot to be that next year. He was pretty good this year.
Yeah. He had, 30 – I saw the stat last night. It was like,
I mean, Trev, he's a guy you talked about earlier. Somebody's like, what caused you to change your mind? Like, okay, first game of the year, I'm like, okay, Cade Klubnik just ain't it. He's going to be a bust. And guess what? He started playing a lot better. Yeah. And part of it was he played better against bad competition. But then he went out and made some big-time throws against SMU in that game. I thought he played pretty well against South Carolina with 2 exceptions. But when he torched that Tech, that's a good Texas secondary. People's like, oh, he exposed the Texas secondary. No, he didn't. Because no other quarterback, like he just was on fire. I mean, you can't say, okay, well, I'm going to replicate throwing this absolute dime on a corner route over top 2 guys. And it's just like, dude, he was throwing throws. You're like, that doesn't translate to the next week. The team, like if Arizona State's like, hey, we can try that. Nope, not going to happen. Yeah, try it. I dare you. See what happens. But, yeah, man, I think he'll go into next season, in my opinion, as one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the season. Now he's got to put up the numbers, but to your point, Trev, if you want to talk about his performance this season, he passed for 3,639 yards, 36 touchdowns, 7 picks, ran for 463 yards, and had 7 more touchdowns, 43 touchdowns, and over 4,000 yards of offense. Yeah.
I mean, Klubnik showed me something this year.
Yeah,
he did,
and I didn't think he was going to. He way better than and he played well in the big moments late in the year too, Trev. That's huge for me. Because even up until November, I was like, yeah, he's putting up numbers against teams that suck. Like, what's he going to do in a big game? He hasn't done anything in a big game so far, but he did, stepped up. And now you're like, okay, I'm on board. He's a good football player.
Mark Avalone, thoughts on Michael Vick becoming a head coach at Norfolk State with little coaching experience, pluses and minuses?
Well, I mean, the minuses are obvious. He has no coaching experience. And there's a lot that goes into being a head football coach that's more than just can you coach scheme and can you call plays and things like that. It's team building. It's having a plan for there's so many things that go into coaching that you don't know if he's going to have. I don't know how involved Michael Vick has been in working with high school players the way that Deion Sanders was for a long time. Like Deion Sanders, I think, coached a couple years in high school, but Deion Sanders was working with young people for a long time, coaching football, just not necessarily formally. So there's some concerns about it. The pluses, number one, you're getting a chance to learn on a much less, under a much smaller microscope than you would if, let's say, Virginia Tech hired him to be their head coach, right? You can kind of work out some of the kinks like Eddie George did at Tennessee State. I mean, obviously, you look at what Eddie George did, he kind of evaluate his first year at their first 2 years at Tennessee State, and it wasn't overly impressive. He made a lot of young coaching head mistakes, but then you look at what he did this year, and he led him to 9 wins. Like he got him to the NCAA playoffs. Like, so he's learning. And so you take the mistakes he's going to make with the fact that you're going to raise more money because you have Michael Vick as your head football coach. Fundraising is going to take a step up. It's going to help you with recruiting your state. Michael Vick is a legend in the state of Virginia. He will be able to recruit in the state of Virginia. And that's, if you're Norfolk State, you got to recruit state of Virginia. And he's a Hampton Roads guy. I mean, Norfolk's across the bridge, right? But it's like Hampton Roads is like, it's the south side. It's Portsmouth, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, and then Chesapeake. And then you go across the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, and it's Hampton and Newport News. But it's all considered like the same type of, it's Tidewater. Well, he's from Newport News. So he's from the area. Like we all play each other in the first round of the playoffs. We'll have some crossover games in the regular season. It's that kind of deal. Texas just went right down the field and scored on Arizona State. And so he's going to recruit Tidewater like crazy. He'll have great success there. He'll be able to recruit up in Richmond where he needs to be. So those things are all going to help Norfolk State. It's going to bring them some recognition. If you don't hire Michael Vick, does anyone care who Norfolk State hired as their head coach if it's not someone like Michael Vick? Those are the positives. And then you just have to make sure that he puts a staff together of experienced coaches that can kind of help him feel his way. I think is it risky? Yeah, sure, it's risky, but it's the rewards, even if he fails on the field, are going to be worth it because your program is going to have millions of dollars it wouldn't have had if he wasn't your head football coach. That's the way I look at it. So I know Michael Vick has a very checkered past in certain areas, but as a Christian, I'm a big believer in true repentance brings true forgiveness. And Michael Vick has been truly repentant for the things that got him in trouble and got him in prison. I think he's become a better man because of it. I think we can all put that in the past and say, let's see what he's doing with his life now. And from what I've seen from Michael Vick the last 10, 15 years, he's become a really good guy and a really good man. And I'm excited to see what he can do because he's a year behind me. I mean, him and Ronald Curry were a year behind me coming into high school in the same area. So like I've always had a bit of an interest in what those two guys did. Ronald Curry's an NFL coach. I think he's an offensive coordinator now. You get to see Michael Vick now getting a chance to head football coach. I love it. I think it's great. And I think that's the level to take those kind of chances, in my opinion. I mean, Eddie George did it in Tennessee. He got Tennessee. Why? Because he's a Tennessee Titan Hall of Famer. You know what I mean? You see what Deion Sanders did. Now, some of these guys have not been successful. But I think for a school like Norfolk State, I think it's really smart and really savvy to bring in a local hero, local sports legend. Allen Iverson's already speaking about it, and Bubba Chuck's still a huge name in that area. Like I said, money's going to be pouring into the program, and that alone is worth it, in my opinion. But if he can surround himself with good coaches, I think he'll have a chance to see. It's worked so far with in certain ways. I mean, Eddie George just took his team to the playoff. Look what Deion Sanders has done. Yeah, love him or hate him, however you feel about Deion Sanders, he didn't win 9 games this year by accident. They didn't win 9 games in spite of Deion Sanders, and he wasn't great at Jackson State by accident just because he got better. I mean, that's part of it, but isn't recruiting kind of it's like you're knocking it for recruiting well. That's kind of a big part of it. You know what I mean? So I'm on board with it, Trev. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm on. Not just because you're a former player doesn't mean you can coach, but I'm also, I think that at that level, I think that's where you give some of these guys with no experience opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool story. I mean, if I would be lying if I said that I have a lot of interest or even know Norfolk State football.
Well, I'm from there, so obviously
Right.
For me, it's going to be a little bit different.
Well, sure, that's what I'm saying. For me, like I don't think I've ever been to Virginia. So, yeah, I know. So thank you for being with us today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.
I'm going to go touch up my resume.
Oh, man. But no, I mean, but it's a cool story. Like I like when players have the opportunity to go and coach. And I think that, and obviously a little bias here, but I think guys with an offensive mind tend to have a good amount of success when it comes to making the switch over to coaching. So, it's a cool story and one that I'll follow now because I've always loved Mike Vick outside of the obvious thing that happened back in the day. But again, when that happened, I was also not that old. So it's not even something that I can loom over his head. I remember like Michael Vick with the Philadelphia Eagles. And when he was airing it out, I don't even remember watching him when he was on the Falcons, unfortunately. I do now because of all the highlights, but I think it's cool. I'll be interested to see what he does.
I'm still just shocked that you said you've never been to Virginia. I just thought that was like a, rite of passage. You had to spend some time in Virginia. I'm so ashamed of you right now.
I'm sorry, buddy.
I'm totally kidding. Got some super chats. From All the Smoke with a super chat. Thank you. Yeah, Met ground game. My bad. Do you think Rocco plays the entire game or will we see Jags a bit? As long as he's healthy, Rocco's going to play.
Yeah.
If he's limited because of the ankle injury, then I think we may see them make a move. I don't know that that'll be Jagasaw or Pendleton, but as long as Rocco can go and play effectively, I think we'll play. We'll see Rocco play. If Rocco can no longer go and he becomes his ankle just limits him and he can't get the job done, then I think we could see him. But I hope that we don't see Jagasaw because of that, because that means Rocco's not playing well. I hope we see Jagasaw late in the game because Notre Dame's up 3 touchdowns and you get in some playing experience, and then maybe he's more ready to step in against Penn State or down the road. That would be my hope. That would be my hope.
No, I agree. Super chat from ND Milton fan. What is Joe Rudolph's affinity for Knapp at left tackle? Personality?
I think he likes the length. I think he likes the tenacity, and I think he likes his athleticism. And I think he thinks that he can coach him up to be better in space. That's what I think it is. Like, I don't think it's he recruited him and it's his guy and he's going to play him no matter what. I don't think it's personality. I don't agree with him, but I think it's a football reason why he's that way. I don't necessarily agree. I mean, look, Anthony Knapp's got very long arms. He's a very athletic kid and he's very powerful. I kind of understand why you might think that, but at the same time, coaches are just like other people. They get infatuated with traits and they overlook the fact that, hey, this guy just doesn't fit there. We see it all the time. I mean, there's certain quarterbacks that just like, why is that guy still in the NFL? Because he's got a big arm and everybody's hoping that they're the team that can figure it out. You know what I mean? So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Sure. I mean, I will say, I do think that Anthony Knapp is a kid that's playing out of position, but it's not like he is a, fifth-year senior that they are just like demanding that he has to play despite a lot of limitations. Like, I mean, he is still 18 years old. You know what I mean? Right. I mean, he's still a true freshman, probably a lot of upside. So, I mean, not probably. He does have a lot of upside, especially if you put him in the correct position. But, I mean, despite the limitations, you know what I mean? I mean, Notre Dame is still 12-1 and getting ready to play in the quarterfinals. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Arizona State probably should have shut up before the game and just had the same humble approach that Boise State had, because this is about to get ugly. Yeah. This is about to get real ugly.
Yeah.
If it's not for running into the punter, you know what I mean? Like, they got their touchdown off of a penalty. So, yeah, it's going to get real ugly for the Sun Devils. Real ugly.
Yeah.
You might have wanted to keep your mouth shut a little bit on that one there, fellas. Want to bring this up from Nicholas Groach. Thank you very, very much, Nicholas. Very good new year to the IB boys. Congratulations on your success, and thank you for all the insightful info. You are more than welcome. Thank you for your support. We appreciate it greatly, and it was great meeting you. And I think it was your grandson and nephew, I think, is who we met also. It was great meeting you guys.
Super chat from A. Reagan. Thank you for the super chat. Thanks, Irish Breakdown. Let's go win this damn thing. It's our time. We win by 2 scores, 2025 national champs.
If they win by 2 scores, I'd feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. If they win by 2 scores, I will get on the post-game show and ask when and where the Irish Breakdown post-game show is going to be for the national championship show.
Yeah.
Super chat from War of 1812. Stop motion. Should we offer Gavin Mueller St. Francis tight end?
I'm fine with them not offering him right now. I'm not in as big of a rush as you are to offer tight ends. We had a conversation with War of 1812 about J.C. Anderson recently. I don't know why there's this panic about tight ends. Guys, they're in January of their junior seasons. They're going to be okay, right? It just deep breaths. We're going to be all right.
Joe PM17, what is the reason for the media overall shift warmer to Notre Dame? Freeman replacing Kelly? I truly don't think the national media understands the talent growth.
Well, I think the shift is only in certain parts. I think there's certain people that are more – you're seeing some more of the non-quote-unquote top talking heads are more pro-Notre Dame. David Pollock and Greg McElroy and people like that. Booger McFarland is actually one of the top talking heads at ESPN that has been pro Notre Dame for a while. And I think most of it is, if you look at it, like former players that watch film. I think it's what it boils down to, is they watch film and they're like, this is a different looking Notre Dame team. Like, you can just listen to Kirby Smart talking about Notre Dame, and he's not talking about try-hard kids. It's not talking about they just play hard and they're great kid. It's like that. Did you see what he was when somebody asked him about Bryce Young? It's like, that's a dude that recognizes that's the kind of kid that normally comes and plays for me.
Yep.
Like somebody asked him in the first show about the what makes a running game so good, and he goes like, well, first of all, it's the dudes they hand it to. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's not the O-line, and it's well, that matters. The dudes he recognizes, like, this is not the same Notre Dame team athletically that we played a few years ago. And I think the real ones are seeing that, and they see the type of players Marcus Freeman is bringing into the program. And I do think there is a level of there's just a more likable coach in charge, but I don't think that's the primary reason. I think a lot of it has to do with they just see what Marcus Freeman's doing. You know, they hey, you know, Notre Dame gets blown out in these games all the time, and then they watch them go toe-to-toe with Ohio State. They watch them twice. They watch them, you know, demolish USC on national TV last year. They see them, you know, beat Texas A&M on the road this year. I just think there's a lot of those things that in the past they don't win games like that is earning a lot more of their respect. And then when the guys watch film, like I don't think Greg McElroy has any agenda why he's more pro Notre Dame outside of I think Greg McElroy cares about being right and giving an honest opinion. He's not always right, just like I'm not always right. But I think his desire is to give an honest opinion and be right. And he watches Notre Dame secondary this offseason, and he's like, holy moly, this is a really good freaking secondary. And there's no agenda behind it. It's just I just think that's what he sees. Now, some people have agendas behind certain things, but I just think that the guys like that, it's just, hey, I'm going to give you my honest opinion. I don't always agree with it. Like I saw a takeaway that David Pollack had about the Boise State game last night. I thought he was wrong. But I think it's just David Pollack giving his honest opinion. So you can choose to engage it and agree with it or disagree with it. But at least you feel like you're getting an honest. And that's all I ask for. I don't have to like your opinion. Just give me an honest I just want to know that I'm giving you're putting thought into it, that you've actually studied the things you're talking about, and that you're giving an honest opinion, not corporate spin. And I like corporate, like Kirk Herbstreit's just become this just giant corporate shill. And that's what's so disappointing. Because I used to like him, but the last 6-7 years, he's just become a corporate hack. And you know, that's why he's still a top dog, despite the fact his takes are terrible. He's not even that good of a color guy, but he still gets top billing. Why? Because he's going to say what they want him to say. That's what it is. And that's why I don't watch those things anymore.
Sure.
Isaac Gano, I think is how we say that. Been watching you guys for years. Love your show and the great analysis of Notre Dame football. Go Irish, and thank you guys for what you do. Thank you, Isaac. We appreciate that very, very, very much, man. I really do appreciate it. And then Isaac also had he said, do you agree with the following statement? Beating Georgia means Notre Dame football is back. And also then we would be favored the rest of the way.
I don't think Notre Dame is going to be favored the rest of the way just because there's going to be a powerhouse between Ohio State and Oregon. I think whoever wins that matchup is going to become the favorite to win the national championship unless Georgia beats Notre Dame. And then I think Georgia then becomes the favorite to win the national championship. So I would
still think Georgia would be an underdog against Ohio State.
Yeah.
And I think same thing is true, Trevor. If Texas beats Ohio State or Oregon, they would then be favored to beat Notre Dame because they beat those two teams you talked about. So I think whoever comes out of that part of the bracket will be favored over Notre Dame. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. And I like being back. This honestly kind of just comes from different perspectives, because I can't say in my lifetime that they're back. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, this is the best they've ever been in my lifetime. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question for sure.
I guess I'd have to say, what does back mean? Are they back as being like a tier 1 team? I think that would probably vault them into that status, as long as, like, if they do lose a game moving forward, they don't get demolished, right? Like if you beat Georgia in a close game with their backup quarterback and then go get beat by Ohio State by 25, I don't think that means you're necessarily back. So, I mean, how you finish is going to matter. But Notre Dame is not truly back to Notre Dame standard until they win a title. Yes, would that put them in tier 1? I believe so. But it's the bottom of tier 1. And Notre Dame is supposed to be on the top of tier 1. And that means you won a championship. So I don't think they're truly back, Trev, until they win that. But I do think this puts them in back into that upper echelon, which they've never been in your lifetime, to your point. And then my lifetime, they haven't been in there since 1993. So I agree with you completely on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question to think about.
Okay, let's get some here. There we go.
Tom Frawley. Will Riley run more RPO and play action passes tonight?
Maybe. I mean, I'd like to see that. RPO, I think we'll see some of the perimeter RPOs tonight, Trev. I don't know that we'll see like the glance routes and things like that against this Georgia team, but like, RPO screens, RPO hitches, and quick outs against their off coverage at times. We'll still do at times. I think we'll see some of that. Play action, I hope so. I think it's there. And I also think about play action is it's a way to get into Max Pro that gives you more favorable downfield route options. Whereas if you do Max Pro out of drop back, there's a chance they're dropping 6 or 7 guys into coverage and you've got 3 in a route. You know what I mean? Or at the most, if you go Max Pro, you're having 7 blockers plus the quarterback. So, 3 out. Where play action can get you into a Max Pro situation that's going to get safeties and linebackers down in the box, which allows you to have more favorable downfield routes. So, I think that's another reason I'd like to see some of that.
Yeah, I mean, play action and RPO just puts Riley Leonard in a position where he can go be an athlete, and that's where he's at his best. That's when he gets into a rhythm. So for all those reasons, that's why I hope. I also hope, just with all the things that are going on tonight, or that have been going on the last 12 hours down in NOLA, I hope we see it tonight. I mean, oh my goodness. As if I didn't need anything else to make me more antsy about the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah.
I might now at the last second be asked to wait another day. I'm still waiting until
I don't think that's going to happen from the stuff that I'm seeing, but
it's both sides. Like an ABC account, like a news account tweeted that it is happening, and NBC one said that it wasn't. Oh man. Yeah. As if there needed to be any more distractions for this game.
Right. Yeah. We got one from Jason Smith.
Do you think Penn State had an advantage playing round 1?
I think last night was our first and we're seeing it a little bit tonight, right now in this game too. The teams that played in round 1 look way better early so far. And now we're 2 games in. And the team that's coming off of a game a little over a week and a half ago, have looked way better in the first quarter. And Boise State missing field goals, sloppy play, your running back who hasn't played in a month, fumbling the ball. Like you saw uncharacteristic mistakes from the teams that now part of it too is the team that won yesterday and the team that's winning right now is the better team.
Sure.
Right. But just the uncharacteristic mistakes that you're, giving up a punt return. That's the kind of thing that happens when you haven't played in a month and you're sloppy. I think what Nick Saban said, the hardest thing to do after not playing for a month is to tackle.
I think it's going to be the most telling thing is going to be the Oregon-Ohio State game, because those are 2 very evenly matched teams, right? And so if it is, once again, for a 3rd game in a row, the team that played a week and a half ago coming out in the first quarter and just looking like the clearly better football team, I think it's safe to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, Notre Dame, you better never give up your first round bye.
Man.
You know what I mean? Like,
man,
we're going to have a problem.
Isn't that going to be poetic justice? Yep. Like listening to all the SEC talk heads talk about how now they don't want the bye.
Right.
Yeah.
When it used to be a thing where they talked, you can't even get a bye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't even play in the conference.
You don't deserve a bye. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, cool. We don't. Which, by the way, I agree with.
Yeah.
I was explaining this to my mother-in-law last night. She was asking about it. And I was like, look, they don't deserve to be not playing in a conference championship game. To me, it should be a rite of passage to getting a bye. And if you don't play in one, you don't get a bye. That's why I don't love the idea of getting rid of, just the first round buys altogether. I want to put some things like if you're outside the top 10, you probably don't deserve a bye. Like Arizona State didn't deserve a bye, in my opinion. They still deserve to be in. But, that's kind of where I'm at.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I agree. You and I are on the same page there.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get to this next question here from Tom Balork.
Do you play Love and Price at the same time? I would love that. Personally, like not the entire game, but the mix it up. I mean, that was one of the keys to victory that we had. Mix up formations, mix up personnel, and I think that's something that they would be wise to do, is make that defense account for more than just Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price once at a time. But again, don't do that the whole game. It's the same conversation that we had with playing with tempo. You don't have to come out and look like 2012 Oregon for 60 minutes, but, do it sometimes. And that's how I view playing Love and Price at the same time. I just think it puts defenses in too much of a bind.
Agree.
Jack McKillen. If Charles was ready, would you put him in at left tackle or any position on the O-line with the possibility of messing up the chemistry within that line?
No, because of the second part. Like, Jack, you answered your own question in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do I think Charles Jagasaw is one of their most 5 talented offensive linemen? If you put him in the lineup, he is immediately your most talented offensive lineman. Like, if Charles Jagasaw starts in the Sugar Bowl, he is your most physically gifted offensive lineman. But that doesn't mean he's necessarily part of your best 5 right now. And because of the lack of time playing together. So I am getting some word that makes me think that there's a chance this game might get postponed.
Yeah. They have an official press conference about it too.
Yeah, I just got a couple text messages that make me think that that's going to happen. So I'm going to keep my opinion on that to myself. But, yeah, so hearing more, we'll see. We'll find. I'm not saying it's official. I'm just telling you I'm getting word from people that that's what it's looking like might happen. So guess we have another game day mailbag tomorrow, buddy. But, yeah. But, yeah, here's an interesting one.
Was preparation a cultural problem at Notre Dame with Brian Kelly? Seems to have been a major priority for Coach Marcus Freeman to either establish or fix.
I don't know if preparation is about culture directly. It's a part of it. I think preparation was a problem for Brian Kelly. I think their culture problems went way beyond. They didn't prepare well. But it's a part of it. It's a part of it. But like, I've tried to explain to people, like, Marcus Freeman understands the emotion of being a college football player at this level. Brian Kelly never did. And there's a host of reasons why that is. But, you look at how Marcus Freeman acted before the Texas A&M game. I mean, yeah, it's part of who he is and all that stuff. But it's also your team came out physically ready to play that game. And in so many of those times, Brian Kelly's teams weren't physically ready to play. I mean, forget the fact they didn't have a talented enough roster. They played timid in a lot of these games. They didn't have they had a less talented roster in 2020 than Alabama. They didn't have a less talented roster than Miami in 2017, Trevor. And so those are sort of the frustrations that I have and it was because he was always trying to tamp down the emotion, tamp down the energy, where Marcus Freeman is like, no. Don't tamp it down, harness it. And that's what I always said. Don't tamp down the energy. Don't tamp down the emotion. Harness it and put it in a good direction. And I think what Marcus Freeman has kind of learned is he always understood that, but he has now understood how to properly harness it. And that is why his teams, like, the issues that Marcus Freeman has had in his 3 years have not been how do they play against the best teams on their schedule. They're always ready for those games. It's how did you lose to Marshall? How did you lose to Northern Illinois? How did you lose to Stanford? Like, when they lost to USC in 2022, they were physically ready. There was no, gee, they weren't prepared. There was no, it was never any of that. It was more so, they just were. USC was the better team without Cam Hart, without Tariq Bracy, with Drew Pine at court. They were just a better team. Notre Dame's kids played their butts off in that game. They played hard. Just USC was better that day. There was never a game where you're like, boy, they weren't ready to play mentally in that big game. Didn't always execute. You can maybe say Clemson and Louisville last year being the lone exception, but that's more of the anomaly than what we've seen. And that happens to everybody from time to time. That's kind of, so I think that's a big issue for me.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Like the reason why I think Marcus Freeman led teams can overlook the lesser opponents sometimes is because he's done a really good job in getting his players to actually and truly believe how good they are. We talk about it all the time about how, all teams kind of take on the persona of their head coach. And what was Brian Kelly? He was a guy that talked about how, you have to shop out of a game and And oh man, they just can't compete with the other big dogs along the trail. Like if I'm getting recruited by this guy and I'm hearing him talk about how I'm just not as good as Alabama and Georgia players, like I'm not going to believe that he thinks that I'm better than them, you know? And then you flip the script and you have a guy like Marcus Freeman, who's like, I think we have a roster full of the best guys in the country, which is why I think the days of Notre Dame playing in a playoff game or in a big high octane game, high caliber game, the days of them losing like they did in 2017 to Miami or 2019 to Michigan, or I think those days are gone. You know what I mean? It's fixing the other part of how do you get your team prepared to not overlook the significantly lesser opponents on your schedule, because you do have a big group of guys that believes that they are the best whenever they step onto the field. So I think that's going to be the biggest difference. That's what I think the biggest Marcus Freeman difference is.
So says WDSU New Orleans is reporting the game is postponed. I'm getting some text messages saying that emails are being sent out saying that nothing is official yet. So we'll see. We'll see.
Super chat from Tyler Evans. What are some of your favorite bowl games you watched so far besides the playoffs?
Well, I mean, watching Michigan beat Alabama was a little weird for me because I enjoyed watching Alabama lose for the petty reasons I mentioned before, but I also don't like rooting for Michigan. I thought the first bowl game of the year that I watched was one of the first. It was the Memphis-West Virginia game. It was a heck of a game. It was a really fun and entertaining game.
My favorite one was Navy.
Navy beating Oklahoma. Yeah, that was a good one. I watched the end of the Northern Illinois Fresno game. That was, the fourth quarter and overtime. That was a good game. Toledo and Pitt was fun to watch because, first of all, it was entertaining, and number two, Pat Narduzzi losing is always fun. The Rutgers Kansas State game was a little weird, but the second half was pretty entertaining. It was a pretty entertaining game. Georgia Tech Vanderbilt was kind of a boring game. USC A&M was a really good football game. Like that was A&M dominated early. USC does a great job coming back in the fourth quarter. That was a heck of a game. The most boring bowl game so far was the BC Nebraska game. That was miserable, absolutely miserable. And then the wildest finish was a minute and a half left in the game. ECU's down 21-20. It's 3rd and 10 at their own 14-yard line, and they ran an inside run, and the dude housed it 80-plus yards. I've never seen that before. I've never seen a team on 3rd and 10 at their own 14 with a minute and a half left losing, run an inside run and go 80-something to win a ball game. And then that game also had the most petty fight I've ever seen. They fought over a dude getting his towel yanked off of his backside. It's like, come on, bro. That was a wild finish, but that game otherwise was pretty lame and boring. But so far those are some of my best. The Louisville Washington game, the Sun Bowl yesterday was pretty entertaining. I was watching that at the restaurant last night, like back and forth. Louisville jumps up, Washington comes back. Louisville jumps back up, Washington comes back. I agreed also with Jed Fish going for 2. In a regular season game, playoff game, maybe I would have said, hey, you got the momentum, you came back, going to over. But in a bowl game, go for the win. Why not? Right? I had no issue. I had no problem with that. I would have probably done the same thing in that situation. I'm a big believer with the current rules, Trevor, that if you get a chance to win the game, like this is, I agree wholeheartedly with what Brian Kelly did 2 years ago against Alabama. Look, you got one overtime opportunity to win it. Otherwise, it's all going to come down to 2-point conversions. Because even if you both score touchdowns, you got to hit it. Like, I'm going to go for the win now. I mean, now's as good a time as any, right? If I'm going to have to eventually get a 2-point conversion, I'm going to use my best one right now to win the game. It's over. Yeah, smart. Good. I thought Brian Kelly made the right decision. And even if it didn't work, it was still the right decision.
No, I agree. I mean, it's once you get into overtime, it becomes an unknown. You kind of have to make your judgment call based off of the facts that you know at the time. And the facts is we have the football down a point with the opportunity to win. I don't know if it gets much better than that outside of, well, now we're going to have to go on a, albeit a miniature drive. We're also going to have to hope that our defense holds up, or we can just end it right now. I agree. I'm with that.
Yep. All right. Got a super chat from Justin Fleming. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin, for the super chat. Brian and Trevor, thanks for the content. Coach Freeman names scout team players each week. Who prepares the scout team so the first team is prepped?
Well, it's the whole staff has a role. So like the main coaches are going to do things that, hey, this is the stuff we want to see. This is our script. This is the looks we want to see. Then it's up to, I don't know who specifically, GA analyst types will then be responsible for putting like the cards together and then coaching up the scout team players. So Al Golden's not necessarily over there like running the scout team offense or running the scout team defense. It'll be like, one of the defensive coaches is down there, probably with at least an offensive GA. It would make sense kind of getting the scout team players lined up correctly. And so you'll actually have those coaches down there with them, especially now that you are in a situation, Trev, where you have more analysts that are allowed to be on the field. That gives you more opportunities to have more coaches involved in this situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, thank you for the super chat. I don't have much more to add, if I'm being honest.
All good. Zach Nichols with a super chat. Thought IU fans were unbearable. Please beat Georgia. Vince said something similar when he was around town yesterday, that Georgia fans are a little different than they were in 17 and 19. So, yeah. Yep, we'll see. Let's get to some last few here. Let's stay locked in here until we are done. Aiden Benami. Here we go.
Who's the most important player for Georgia tonight? Do you think Georgia is better with Beck, or as Pate and some others think the overall Georgia talent, et cetera, will rise to the top for Gunnar Stockton?
Georgia's not better with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. They're not better. He's still their best quarterback. What I have said and what I believe is to be true is I do think that Gunnar being in forces Georgia to run their offense more like they should run their offense. But if they would have run that with Carson, they'd still be better than they are with Gunnar running it. You know what I mean? But Pate is also right that when in situations like this, great teams have the mindset of, hey, our QB's out, Gunnar's in, we got to raise our level of play to have his back. You're going to see that from Georgia. There's no question you're going to see that from Georgia. They're not going to be just like, look, well, we got our backup quarterback in the game. We're screwed. Can't beat Notre Dame now. It's like, okay, Carson's not in the game. Gunnar's in the game. It's my job as a left tackle to raise my level of play and get him ready to go and protect him and do my job. I got to be locked in, run my routes, catch the ball, do all. That there is truth to that is what I expect to happen, because if I didn't think that was going to happen, guys, I'd have predicted a much more convincing Notre Dame win. But I think they are going to rise to the occasion, which is why I think it's still going to be a close game. And this is still a very talented Georgia football team, even without Carson Beck. It's still they still have a very talented offensive line, talented running backs, talented pass catchers, one of the best tight end rooms of college football, talented front seven, one of the best linebacker rooms of college football as part of that. And even their young secondary players that are struggling, Dalen Everett is still a very talented player. And, he's just young. And you got to hope that tonight's not the night that he kind of when the game is played, that he figures it all out.
No, I agree. I mean, most important player, I don't know if you can pinpoint it back to one, because everybody's going to play a crucial role in Georgia winning tonight. If that's where it's supposed to go. In situations like this, it's hard for me to say this one player is the most important. I mean, either the running backs are to take some of the weight off of. I mean, the tight ends are going to be, because that's who he's going to immediately target in the passing game outside of Dominic Lovett on a lot of screens, man. I mean, could be anything.
Yep. All right. Let me see here. Let's go here from Jordan Schreiber.
Jordan Schreiber, are you surprised by how little love has been targeted in passes? Do you think we'll see more pass catches in the postseason?
A little surprised. Yeah, I thought he'd be used more in the pass game. They did things early, having him run slot fades early and things like that, but I thought they'd do more. Yeah. Now, I think we could see more in the postseason. Like, now's the whole let it all hang out type of thing. And you and I talked about that earlier in the week, earlier in the prep. I could see this being a game where if they do more 21 personnel, that you could see Jeremiah Love outside getting the football.
Yeah, I mean, with him, I thought we'd see more screens if I'm being honest, especially with the more athletic offensive line. So, yeah, I mean, it is surprising to me for sure.
All right. Hey, speak of the devil, Reese's Chris. There you go, my man.
Was it just me, or did Riley Leonard have a ton of plays he could have kept on the zone read with a lot of space? Were the calls not true zone read, trying to keep him healthy? What do you think?
Some of those weren't zone reads, but some of them I just think he is. It's a give unless, and most of them I was okay with him giving because I think Indiana was trying to play both. And if they're trying to play both, you give it to your running backs. Because I think earlier in the season, I think he made mistakes where he would pull too quickly, and he was more prone to pull. It was like keep unless, and what that means is the coaching point is give unless means like your plan is to give unless they give you a reason otherwise. Whereas with Riley, I kind of felt like it was like I'm keeping this unless they, you know what I mean? And I think that made things a little less effective. And so I think he was maybe getting more comfortable. Hey, give it to your backs unless they force you otherwise. But there's a couple times where I was like, yeah, he probably could have kept that one, but it wasn't a huge deal, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to Riley understanding that throughout this offense, he doesn't have to be Superman every single play, and he can trust the guys around him because there are still I mean, he had no intention of even riding out the fake to Aeneas Williams when he got down near the goal line. That wasn't even an attempted, you know what I mean? So I think some of it is just what he's feeling. But I mean, at times, to Brian's point, he's struggled with reading backsides in the past. But I thought it was pretty sharp against Indiana. Tom Frawley, if Georgia's defense has a weakness, is it their pass coverage?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we've talked about that. Tom, no doubt. They're not a great pass defense. They're not a great pass defense.
Yeah. No, it's not what it was before. And then I would say the number 2 one. Oh, sorry, that's just Georgia's defense. I thought it was Georgia's overall. Yeah, no, pass defense for sure.
Run offense is where you were going if you're going to talk about the offense. Yeah, I agree. You got to make sure that that's still the case. 100%. That's the big thing in this game. You got to make sure that it remains like their rushing offense in this game looks like it did in the regular season with their overall. If Georgia's like around 129 yards rushing, 3-something a carry, which is what was a 4.2 a carry, which is what their numbers were all season. If that's their stat line at the end of the game, I don't think they can beat Notre Dame.
Mohammed Abdi, Brian, do you think Georgia fans are undervaluing experience when it comes to quarterback position?
Yes, big time. I also think, but I think their biggest issue, Trevor, is they're undervaluing Notre Dame. Well, he's still this, he's still that, and Notre Dame doesn't have any good athletes, and Notre Dame can't do this, and Notre Dame can't do that, and I also think there's of all fan bases, Georgia's one that I kind of have the most sympathy for, maybe having unrealistic expectations about a young quarterback because, I mean, let's not forget what happened to their season the first time they made the college football playoff. You know what I mean? True freshman took over for an injured starter. His first game, they beat Notre Dame on the road, and then they go play for the national championship. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm a Georgia fan, I'd probably have an unrealistic expectation of what experience means at a quarterback position as well. Their first national title, they put a former walk-on who came off the bench because their 5-star JT Daniels got benched, and he leads them to the championship. Yeah, I can understand Georgia fans having a little bit of a jaded view or a jacked up view of what actually is needed at quarterback to win because their history says it shouldn't matter. It doesn't matter a whole lot.
Right.
And so I'm sympathetic to it, but I think their bigger undervaluing is more of Notre Dame than it is. Like, it's a disrespect. Like, they would be more worried about Gunnar Stockton if they were playing Bama or Ole Miss or Ohio State or maybe not even Ohio State. Another really good SEC team.
I think it's their way of coping. I do, because it's not like there's not even analysis in like why they were more confident with Gunnar Stockton.
Yeah.
Legitimately, it's a lot of, he reminds me of Stetson Bennett. That's why they're better off. It's like, okay, sounds good. It's like, did you see what he did in high school? And it's like, yeah, Notre Dame's defense is better than any defense he faced in high school. I hate to break it to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Kirkpatrick, using updated records, Notre Dame was 5-0 versus ranked teams that had an .82 winning percentage. Georgia was 4-2 against 6 ranked teams with a .18 winning percentage.
Yep. There is, okay, agree with that. You also have to, proper context, say, but the teams at the top that Georgia played are better than the teams that are top of what Notre Dame played.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a difference between the team that's 5th ranked and the team that's 15th ranked, or the team that's 10th ranked and the team that's 23rd ranked. So, yes, Notre Dame performed better against ranked teams than Georgia did, but Georgia played 3 games against teams that were in the top 5. Notre Dame played none. So, I mean, that has to be taken into account. Now, the teams that they lost to were more on par with Louisville than they were Texas, if we're being honest.
No, I agree. I mean, it's stats like this why you need context. It's exactly because, you know, if you look at that, you're just looking at overall record versus ranked teams. But I mean, the top of the top ranked games for Alabama or for Georgia significantly.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this is why I look at it. Notre Dame beat a team similar to Clemson in Texas A&M, in my opinion. Clemson's better, but they're similar. And Georgia also beat them. Beat them more convincingly. Notre Dame played teams like Bama and Ole Miss and beat them, whereas Ole Miss or Georgia lost to them. Right? As I said, I think Louisville is similar to those two teams. Notre Dame did not play anybody in the caliber of Texas. And they beat Texas twice. And that's the difference. Notre Dame did not play, like you could say Louisville's as good as Alabama and Ole Miss, but I don't know that I could say that they're necessarily as good as Tennessee.
Sure.
What Tennessee was. And they also played Tennessee and beat Tennessee. You take the top 3 teams that they beat, they're just better than the top 3 teams that Notre Dame beat. That doesn't mean they're a better team. This is the whole annoying thing about the strength of schedule. Just because you played a tougher schedule doesn't mean you're the better team, right? It just means you played a tougher schedule. That's all it means. You know, but if you're going to talk about the schedule, you have to be honest and say that Notre Dame's ranked wins are not like Georgia's ranked wins. That doesn't mean Georgia's a better team, but beating Tennessee is more impressive than beating Army. It just is. Beating Texas is more impressive than beating Louisville and Texas A&M and Army and Navy. It just is. It's more impressive than beating Indiana. It just is. And they did it twice. So it's a good football team. But I think to his point, where I'd say is I think people are underestimating that Notre Dame has played a lot of tough games this year and blew out those teams. They not, outside of Louisville, they were even the A&M game, it was competitive. That's because Notre Dame kept shooting themselves in their foot and missing opportunities. That game should not have been as close as it was, in my opinion. And the one thing I got wrong preseason-wise, I said I do not want to play A&M in November. I got that wrong. Because the way A&M was playing in November and the way Notre Dame was playing in November, Notre Dame would have destroyed Texas A&M in November.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got that wrong.
What matchup are you most confident Notre Dame will win? What matchup are most confident Georgia will win?
I think the matchup I'm most confident that Georgia will win. I'm not confident that Georgia will win any of the matchups. I think if I was betting on it, I'd say probably their D-line against Notre Dame's O-line. That's the one I'm most concerned about. That's the one I think they probably have the best shot at winning. The one I'm most concerned, I'm most optimistic that Notre Dame will win. Probably the skill matchup on Notre Dame defense against the Georgia offense. I think Notre Dame will win that matchup. I think Georgia will make some plays. I think Notre Dame still wins that matchup. I just think Notre Dame has the better athletes in this game. I know people don't want to hear that, and a lot of people aren't going to agree with that. Just what I believe, and that's a big reason why I think Notre Dame wins that game tonight.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, my matchups were the same as yours.
Yeah.
Rocket 25, how much more might be asked of Bryce Young in terms of getting more of the pass rush from the edge? Or is that too much of a risk in terms of Georgia exploiting a freshman losing contain?
I mean, you take the good with the bad.
Sure.
I mean, that's the reality of it. You take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think that Bryson, I think they're going to continue to use him the same that he has because he's really started to ramp it up the last 4 games. Like, again, I think Notre Dame can come out and do things differently. But again, like, I don't think you're going to come out and see this completely different team on either side of the football. That's, all right, Jeremiah, get ready to touch the ball 45 times tonight because we're playing Georgia. All right, Bryce Young, I know you're a rotational guy, but we're starting you and we're going to move you all along the defensive line. Like this is one of those games where, as hard as it might be for some people to believe, Notre Dame just has to play their game to win it.
Yeah,
they do. So that's where I'm at with that one.
Yep. So Trev, that is going to do it for this show. I have not seen anything because we've been doing the show. I haven't had a chance to see if there's anything official yet about tonight's game. So there's conflicting reports both sides. What have you heard? What do you say, Trev?
In the press conference, like the DA for Louisiana said the game was going to be postponed.
He did say it officially.
For what's that?
Did he say to when?
Tomorrow, I think at 8:45.
Okay. So it does look like no game tonight. I'm going to go try to find that and then do a story on it. So, but that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. So obviously no post-game show tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Trev and I will talk about whether or not we're going to do a show tomorrow, a similar show tomorrow. We'll see. We're going to have to chat about some things, but stay safe out there. If you're down in New Orleans, obviously stay safe as well. And we will talk to y'all again very soon. Hopefully this year, obviously didn't get off to a great start with everything that happened, but obviously hopefully we're all going to be able to get back on track and get ready for this game. But just a reminder that there are people who lost their lives, and that's a whole lot more important than a football game. And just keep their families and the grief they're dealing with in your thoughts and prayers, and just continue to every day. This is why I pray so much, that evil be vanquished. And that's exactly what this is. That's all this is. It's just evil and an evil ideology. And so, we love football and can't wait for the game tomorrow night. But, I have some opinions about whether they should or shouldn't have canceled the game, but that's all irrelevant to the fact that there were sadly 10 innocent people lost their lives because of evil. And, there's other people that are injured. Hopefully those aren't life-threatening, but those families are grieving in a way that some of us can maybe imagine, but most of us can't. And let's remember them today as we think about that, and we think about how their year started. So just keep that in mind. I know we're a lot of people in this chat that understand the power of prayer and appreciate the power of prayer, and let's definitely try to remember those folks in our prayers today and lift them up and then lift up the players and the teams, because there's a lot of young people that are, kind of tragic thing impacts their lives. We don't know how they're going to respond to it. And hopefully there's people that can kind of be there to give them, counsel on how to react and respond to this. And for all of you that have family down there or are down there, please stay safe. And we hope you guys all are good. And we'll see y'all here very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.